So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Was Sealed into Steven Universe. So let's start the series. The skies were angry, as thunder and lightning roared and rain came pouring down. Two humongous statues of legendary shinobi were situated on two small islands in the valley separated by the raging water of a waterfall. There was a boy stood on each of the statues, their figures barely seen through the shadow which had been created by the dark clouds covering the sun. One of the boys wore an outfit of dark blue and black which had an odd fan symbol stuck on the back of his shirt, the top half red and the bottom white. His eyes were a vengeful red with spinning tomos and his pitch black hair looked oddly like the bottom half of a duck. The child standing opposite him, however, wore a bright orange jumpsuit along with blue sandals and had three strange, whisker-like birthmarks on each of his cheeks. His shining, golden hair spiked in all directions and his eyes were a determined cerulean. They both had a hand stuck out, each powering up their respective signature techniques. I will return you to Konoha, whether you come willingly or not, the blonde one said confidently. TCH. The day that happens is the day that an Uchiha like me actually loses to a class dobe like you. The other boy smirked. Heh, cocky as always, eh? We'll see. The two tensed and their eyes narrowed in concentration, waiting to see who would move first. None of them spoke a word as lightning suddenly struck in the middle of them both, casting a bright light that showed the injuries the boys had for a split second. The genin took the lightning as their cue and leaped off their respective statues, their hands at their fronts, pointed at the other boy as they yelled their opponent's name. Naruto, Sasuke. A loud explosion could be heard over the valley, drowning out the sounds created by the current weather. A hand covered in lightning met with one that held a powerful, spiraling sphere of blue energy as their figures collided high above the river. A strong gust of wind made by the power clash blew away from the young shinobi, causing even the mightiest trees in the area to bend. A dark purplish orb consumed the two as their techniques fought for dominance over the others. Sasuke saw the now red eyes of his ex-teammate and flinched. His concentration paused for a second. His lightning-covered hand slipped from where it collided with the other boy's and went straight through his chest. Sasuke momentarily froze in shock and the blonde boy used the opening to gain the upper hand as he pushed the dark-haired boy away. Reiaha! With a cry, the orange-wearing genin managed to overpower dark-haired one and pushed him to the bottom of the valley. Sasuke crashed into the earth, creating a rather large crater. How the boy thought, how did Naruto beat me? Not long afterwards, Naruto himself fell to the ground and, though weak and tired from the fight, managed to land on his feet, the hole in his chest no longer bleeding and was momentarily filled with red chakra. I told you I'd beat you, Team the Jinchuriki panted. Now let's go back. That stupid hickey the snake gave you is messing you up. Naruto limped over to Sasuke and lifted him up and placed one of Sasuke's arms around his neck to support him. He looked towards the direction of Konoha. Damn it, we just had to land on the side of the valley that was away from the village, the boy cursed in his mind. Well, complaining isn't gonna help us get there faster now, is it? The young Uzumaki pulled the silent Uchiha up and he slowly made his way to the river as he began the slow, and no doubt painful trek back to their birthplace. Why? Naruto stopped when the last Uchiha broke the silence between them. Why did you come for me? Was it because it was the Hokage's orders? Because Sakura asked you to? Or did someone bribe you with ninjutsu to come after me? Sasuke asked. He was looking down while the other boy dragged him. Naruto smiled and continued on, slowly limping to the edge of the small land on which the statue of Madara Uchiha stood on. Well, me promising to Sakura that I'd get you back is a small part of why. And I guess being ordered by Bachan helped by giving me a reason to go after you without having to sneak out of the village. Naruto answered and Sasuke turned his gaze to the now grinning boy. But it was mostly because of the fact that, while you probably see me as a mere annoyance, I see you as my own brother. Sasuke's eyes widened in shock as Naruto continued to speak. Out of everyone in our age group, you're the only one who can understand me. Well, at least to a certain degree. You understand the pain of not having anyone close to you. The pain of not having anyone to pick you up when you're down. The pain of being alone. Most of all, you know how it feels to be treated differently because of something that happened to you at a young age. Naruto chuckled. Plus, you can't deny that ever since the formation of Team 7, it's like the hole created by that pain has been filled up, even by just a little bit, yeah? Naruto looked back down at Sasuke, who was gazing at the ground, contemplating on what he had just heard. He reminisced about the memories he had during his childhood as well as his time on Team 7. He remembered the pain he felt when he found out about his older brother killing everyone from his clan, when he lost everyone close to him. But he also remembered feeling happy when Team 7 was first formed, when they trained together, when they did missions together, even when they did ridiculous things together. Like when they tried to get Kakashi to take his mask off his face, he grew a smile. Naruto was right, Team 7 did help with the pain of being alone. When he was with them, he felt like he had a family again. Naruto stopped moving, causing him to look up only to see the large body of water in front of the two of them. Now, how are we supposed to cross this amount of water? Naruto thought out loud. Well, you're the only one out of the two of us that can actually walk. Ototo. Naruto's head quickly snapped towards Sasuke. It was now his eyes that widened in shock. After a few seconds of processing, a face-splitting grin appeared on his face. Well, you're the one who usually thinks of the plans when Kakashi-sensei or Sakura-chan can't. Any bright ideas, Anai-san? Now Sasuke had a grin of his own too. Before he could respond, a rustle in the trees got their attention as their lazy sensei appeared with one of his summons, Pakken. His usually calm posture was replaced by a panicking and alert one. He frantically looked around and slightly relaxed as he spotted them, but quickly became tense again once he saw the state they were in. He ran toward them and easily jumped the river and landed in front of the two. Naruto! Sasuke! About time you got here, sensei. Hey, do me a favor and get Sasuke to the hospital. The blonde laughed weakly before passing out. The twin cries of his name from his teacher and brother were the last things he heard before everything went black. Konoha Hospital. Gah! Naruto sprung up from his bed before falling back down, his hand clutching his chest as burning pain erupted from the area. What happened? He looked around the room he was currently in, studying the porcelain white walls. You nearly died, that's what. A deep, loud, growling voice resonated in his head. Damn it, every time I either take a nap or you take one step outside of this kami-forsaken village, you nearly lose your life. Ototo. Sorry Kurama and I just can't help the fact that near-death situations always find me. The injured boy laughed nervously. A few silent minutes passed, making Naruto even more nervous than he already was. Damn right you're sorry, the Bijou finally grumbled before returning to his interrupted nap. Naruto let out the breath he didn't know he was holding in relief. He looked around the room once more, recognizing it as a hospital room. He slowly slid off the bed, hissing in pain as he stood up. He then turned to the full-body mirror beside his bed and looked over his heavily bandaged form. He was dressed in a hospital gown, and bandages framed his face and wrapped around his arms. He looked down at his chest, which was bleeding. If the bloody bandages were any indication, he absent-mindedly felt the wrapping around his chest. He flinched when a chakra signature suddenly appeared inside the room he was in. He quickly spun to face the figure only to wince as his injuries felt as if they were burning. He managed to stay on his feet and saw the black-haired, turtle-masked ANBU who had shined into his room and was holding a clean set of his orange jumpsuit. The ANBU threw the jumpsuit at Naruto, who caught it with slight difficulty as a distinctly female voice was heard clearly through the turtle mask. Uzumaki-san, you have been called to a meeting. Naruto just blinked silently at this for a few seconds before replying. Alright, let me just get changed out of this annoying gown first. The room suddenly blurred and spiraled into a small hole, as if it was being sucked in by some sort of powerful force. The hospital patient brought his arms up to cover his face as chairs and IVs flew past his face and into the miniature black hole in front of him. Once the whole area was sucked in, the odd abnormality in space-time suddenly spat out Konoha's council room, and the blonde found himself facing the civilian council along with the 3 Konoha elders. Dressed in the jumpsuit he was just holding a few seconds ago before the hole transported him, the senseis of his graduating class's genin teams were standing off to the side, along with the other 8 genin themselves and Team Guy. Uzumaki Naruto, the council has decided your fate, due to you harming a fellow leaf ninja and the disturbing amount of times you have used the demon Kyuubi's chakra. The council has chosen to punish you, to prevent any danger befalling unto Konoha from the possibility of the fox's release. You have been sentenced to death, by public execution, said Danzo, one of the 3 Konoha elders. He was an old, black-haired man who was supporting himself with a cane and had an X-like scar on his chin and bandages wrapped around his left eye and left arm. Naruto hung his head. He was expecting something like this from the moment he was told of the meeting. After all, even though they stopped attacking him in mobs when he graduated from the academy because of the rules against civilians attacking Leaf Shinobi, the village still treated him with hatred and disdain. The Jonin had narrowed their eyes and had suspicious looks on their faces, knowing that the punishment was mostly because of their animosity towards the Kyubi being directed at the young blonde. The 11 genin standing with them gasped and started crying out objections towards their decision. Even the usually stoic Shino and Niji started to yell. They had been informed beforehand about Naruto's connection with the demon fox who had attacked their birthplace years ago and, unlike the ignorant adults that the civilian council was comprised of, they understood that Naruto was not the Kyubi himself, only its jailer. No way. Council must rethink this decision. Shikamaru shouted. What? Naruto doesn't deserve execution. All those times he used the Kyubi's chakra was only when his fellow Leaf Shinobi were in danger. Sakura added. Yes, Uzumaki-san does not deserve death. During our match in the Chunin exams, he could have used the demon's power to disable me instantly at the beginning. Instead, he only started to use the chakra once I had blocked his tenketsu and was nearly unable to move, Niji exclaimed. Naruto only used the demonic chakra when my mind and body was under the control of Orochimaru's curse mark. The vile power that the seal had used to corrupt my mind was too strong for Naruto to fight against without the Kyubi's help. It was because of his usage of the chakra that I am even here in the first place. It is true that if it were not for him using the chakra, I would not be as injured as I am. But it is also a fact that without the Kyubi's help during our fight, I would not have been able to clear my mind from the curse mark's influence in time, and would have been in Orochimaru's clutches right now, Sasuke retorted to the council's charges. While the rest of the genin cried out in agreement, the civilian council looked scandalized. Their faces showed horror as the young children, especially the last Uchiha, were yelling in the demon child's defense. No, the demon has corrupted the village's young. How could we have not been able to see this sooner? A fat, balding, male merchant bellowed. I am afraid they may be too far gone. As much as it pains me to say this, we must execute them as well. It is the least we can do for the poor, innocent children who have fallen into the demon's influence. May they rest in peace, a rich, lanky man who looked as if he was just skin and bones said in dismay. When the civilian council member said this, it was now Naruto and the Jonin that yelled out in anger. This trial was supposed to be just about my punishment. Why are you intending to harm them as well? Naruto yelled in anger, his eyes starting to turn into a slightly purplish color. Who do you think you are to order the execution of these 12 genin? Kurenai cried out. She stretched her arm to the side, gesturing to the rookie shinobi standing beside her, especially when 7 of which are clan heirs. Asuma added, emphasizing the last 2 words. I find the missing presences of the Hokage and the shinobi half of the Konoha Council very disturbing, as well as very suspicious. Making decisions such as these and then carrying them out without their consent is considered treason, and is an instant sentence to death, Kakashi growled, lowering himself into a fighting stance, his lone, visible eye narrowing even more in suspicion, and he moved to reveal his Sharingan eye when he saw that the civilian council was starting to sweat nervously. Fortunately for them, Danzo had come to their rescue. Because of the infiltration of Orochimaru's 4 best ninja when they came to communicate with Uchiha Sasuke, the Hokage and Shinobi Council are out busy with both checking and upgrading every single defense this village has. We have taken it upon ourselves to deal with small matters such as these as they are busy with more important problems. With the current actions that you are doing right now, I find you 3 a threat to the safety of the council members present. However much of an asset you may be, we cannot have any loose cannons at this point in time, the half-blind elder said calmly. No matter, Uzumaki Naruto will not get a public execution. The eyes of the shinobi, the council members and the 2 other elders widened at this, and the genin started to smile. Instead, you Jonin and all you traitorous genin will be executed here and now. Umbu. Before the shinobi could even say anything, everyone but Naruto had a tanto shoved straight through their chests, which were wielded by white-masked Anbu. The blonde could not do anything as chains wrapped around his hands and ankles, keeping him from moving. The room once again spun into a small black hole and he saw the pained expressions on the faces of his friends before they disappeared along with the elders and civilian council. He was now alone, still bound in the council room. But there was an ANBU member in front of him who was a blue-haired male wearing a pure white mask and was kneeling with his head down. What the heck is going on? But before he could finish his sentence, the walls of the room the 2 were in turned from white to pitch black, and red light illuminated the area. Confused, Naruto tried to take a few steps back, but the chains prevented him from doing so. What the F? Naruto stopped speaking once again when he turned to the only other occupant in the room, who suddenly grew 30 feet tall, breaking the whole room except for a small piece of the floor which Naruto was standing on. The eye holes of the Anbu mask shone an ominous yellow color, and the older shinobi's visible skin turned into a scaly and reptilian red. The bottom half of his mask broke and showed a mouth filled with sharp, jagged teeth as the transformed male gave the injured boy a menacing grin. It was all your fault, demon. Because of you. Because of your weakness and lack of defiance, they died. They all had such great futures ahead of them too, especially the young genin. But their lives were taken from them at a time too soon, all because of you. I received a mission neither from the Hokage nor the council. At first I was reluctant, but after knowing about all your wrongdoings, I am all too happy to finish it. The monster pounced on him. The last thing he saw were the evil yellow eyes and the jagged teeth-filled mouth of the monster before. Unknown area. Gasped a Pant. Damn it, Pant. A male hooded figure sprung up from their perch up on a tree inside a forest, nearly slipping off the branch they were lying on. He panted for a few minutes, his heart pounding in his chest before it finally calmed down. Sigh. No sleep for this night either, huh? The moon shone in the night sky, its light glowing bright enough to show the hooded man's appearance. The figure wore a brown, hooded cloak which was torn at the edges over an outfit comprised of an orange, short-sleeved hoodie with a black long-sleeved undershirt along with dark blue cargo pants, and red sneakers along with a face mask that covered the bottom half of his face. Covering the whole of his right arm was a tattoo of a nine-tailed fox, and there were 2 dog tags attached to the thin chain wrapped around the male's neck. One had the kanji for 9 engraved on one side and the kanji for Bija on the other. The second tag had the Uzumaki clan symbol engraved on the front and the kanji for banished demon on the back. The figure pulled their cloak's hood off, showing spiky, yellow hair that shined in the moonlight and piercing crimson eyes that spun back into a calm cerulean. The young man sighed and laid his back to the tree once more, intending to stay awake for the rest of the night. On the branch across where the blue-eyed man was sitting on, was a blood-red, multi-tailed fox, its eyes open and alert, staring at the mysterious character before it. Again, Kit? After all these years, you still can't get a single wink of sleep in peace, it muttered, laying down on the branch and laid its head on its paws, yawning. It said at least don't do anything strenuous before dawn. We can't stay in one spot for too long, so we have to conserve energy. We've overstayed our welcome here for too long already. The young man across the fox sighed in agreement, his tense body relaxing slightly. Yeah, Beach City is quite far away. It's also the only place we can go to right now with him breathing down our necks. The spiky-haired figure just looked up at the sky, studying the stars and moon. This is just great. We get a chance to live in peace. And then that annoying guy shows up and keeps us from going wherever we want without having to look behind our backs. The blue-eyed male thought to himself before muttering, well, it's night watch for me again, as always. He closed his eyes as he relaxed and closed his eyes, enhancing his sensing ability. He started his usual watch on whether someone had followed them to their location or not. He absent-mindedly brought a hand to above his heart when the scar upon it started to ache slightly. Feeling the bump that was the strange item embedded into his flesh, the young man, whose eyes were still closed, didn't notice the crimson eye that was studying him for a moment before closing. The bellows of superiors ordering their miners could be heard emanating from the forest. The loud cries and shouts came from a platoon of soldiers who were frantically searching for something, or rather, someone. They wore tinted goggles over their eyes as well as dark blue, full-body jumpsuits with black, armored vests which had a strange insignia that looked oddly like a skull with feathery wings stitched on the back. As they spread out to search the area, 100 feet away from them a nine-tailed fox twice the size of a normal wolf dashed through the same woods. A greenish, bleeding, blond young man who had burn marks scattered all over his body and a horrible, deep cut on his stomach was on the fox's blood-covered back. The red quadrupedal animal's tails were the only things that kept him from falling off. The injured man's wounds were glowing a faint green. He spat out blood and wrapped his arms around his wounded stomach as pain racked his body. The fox sent a worried look to the occupant laying on his back when he heard the pained moans coming from him. Kekurama, cough, the bleeding man rasped out. His voice was hoarse due to his coughing. Just hang in there, Kit. We're nearly at the next safe spot. We'll get you help soon. Just hang on, Naruto. The now named Kurama yelled out reassuringly, though it seemed as if it was trying to convince itself rather than the sick blonde. The fox's eyes lingered on the groaning figure before it turned its attention back to its front. "Gah, how the Kami's name did they find us?" the multi-tailed creature angrily said in its head and growled as it thought back to how they ended up in this situation. Flashback. "If only there were others like you," was the fox's last thought before it dozed off, intending to get a few hours of sleep before dawn. Naruto relaxed for a few more minutes before his eyes snapped open when Kurama's snores started to drift into the air. After double-checking that the bijou was indeed asleep, he slid off the branch he was sitting on and landed silently on the forest ground. He looked left and right, checking if anyone was walking by. When he sensed that no one was coming, he started to jog silently through the trees, skillfully ducking under branches and jumping slightly over stray roots and logs. After 10 minutes, the Jinchuriki decided that he was far enough from his sleeping older brother before stretching, some of his joints popping as he moved. "Ah, that feels a lot better," he grinned. It had been a while since he was able to move around freely, but he could do whatever he wanted now that Kurama was asleep. Naruto frowned slightly when he was reminded of his dream. Before shaking the thoughts out of his head, he closed his eyes and was covered in a blue light before he started to practice his jutsu. The bijou had convinced him to not use them in scuffles against the humans in this world, not only because of the fact that they were too fragile to even withstand a weak gust from a D-ranked wind jutsu, but because they had already attracted enough attention from a crazy human whose mentality seemed to be a mixture of Madara, Orochimaru and Danzo. Not to mention the fact that there was the other stipulation to using his ninjutsu for nearly 4 hours. He attempted to use bijou chakra, practiced his taijutsu, his elemental ninjutsu, the Rasengan and its variants, which he had created with Kurama's help, and last but not least, worked on his dojutsu. The shinobi fingered the dog tags hanging from his neck as he thought about his late brother. Before the black-haired boy had exhaled his last breath, the Uchiha had given him a jar filled with strange, greenish liquid that kept his Sharingan eyes inside intact. With the stunt that the village had just pulled, the dying heir knew that they could not be trusted with the power of his clan. Kurama had implanted the eyes in the first few weeks they had been on this planet. The Uzumaki sighed, and with one last Otama Rasengan, the blue light enveloped him again before he fell onto his back in exhaustion. Naruto panted and stared up at the black, star-filled sky, his thoughts then moving towards the first human he and Kurama ever trusted in this earth. Naruto and Kurama had met him when the 24-year-old was taking a stroll in the local park and was jumped by multiple armed men. The two had saved him. At that time, they had only been in this new world for 3 years. They spent most of the time moving around, getting acquainted with the more peaceful land and learning more about it while finding time to train in between. The young male had thanked them profusely when the thugs were defeated, and when he found out that they didn't have a place to stay, he had insisted that they stay at his home. His name was Rifu Yujiramono. Apparently he was from Japan, and his family's company had branched out, so he had to move countries to help maintain the business. The two had actually stayed with Rifu for 2 years and had grown closer to him. One day, they found out about the man's parents thinking of a better and more efficient way to power modern humanity's cars, televisions and other technologies without any backlashes. After much persuasion from Naruto to get Kurama to agree, they told him about chakra. They told him that Naruto healed faster than normal because of it, how he, Naruto, could potentially die from having chakra depletion, how the air of the planet they were on was filled with nature chakra, and that even Rifu himself had chakra inside him, albeit only a small amount. Naruto allowed Rifu to use his machinery on him to study the energy, and see if there was any way for this world to use it instead of things such as oil and electricity. Sadly, a few days before Rifu's 27th birthday, his parents had died on their way to visit their son due to an airplane crash. Once he learned of their deaths, Rifu started to get colder as well as more reclusive, and kept staying in his study for long periods of time. The two started to get suspicious of him when they saw that he had started to read theories on what happened to people after their death. They were glad that they had only told Rifu about chakra and nothing about the techniques and other feats they could possibly achieve with it. When Kurama went into the human study to investigate why he was acting so different, he found stacks of paper filled with research on the possible resurrection of his parents, and had started to connect the usage of chakra to the subject. The two left as soon as possible, unfortunately not without having a last confrontation with Rifu, and saw their friend go mad. He rambled about how they had to help him, that he knew that they could somehow bring his parents back to life but didn't choose to, and that they couldn't run away forever. He swore that he would get them to come back whether by force or not, and when he got them, the ex-Leaf Shinobi and Bijou would have to return his parents to the land of the living. A few months later, they found out that Rifu had been true to his word, and had sent men equipped with weapons built to subdue them. After each platoon that they had disabled, they noticed that it started to get harder and harder to keep them back with just chakra-enhanced attacks, and chose to try to keep to the shadows as much as they could. Using ninjutsu would just give Rifu proof of his suspicion about their abilities and gain even more incentive on capturing them. Naruto shook his head out of his thoughts once again, and started to close his eyes. His exhaustion was taking the better of him, and he hoped for a dreamless sleep, as the darkness began to consume his vision. His ears twitched and he heard rustling and the sound of beeping. The Jinchuriki's eyes snapped open and quickly stood up when he saw the small, round, metallic objects around him, but as he tried to leap away, he faltered slightly when he moved to jump and winced as his sore body screamed at him to stop moving. Because of his stumble, he didn't get far enough away and was caught in the explosion of the bombs. The blast made him fly back a few feet. His body looked like a ragdoll as he rolled on the ground before he managed to regain his footing. The blonde fell to a knee as he panted in exertion. One of his eyes was closed, and his right hand was clutching his left arm. He quickly sent a pulse of chakra to alert Kurama before he had to flip backwards to dodge a sword that was aimed at his chest and performed a handstand, wincing again as pain shot through his left forearm. He then pushed off of the ground, continuing with another flip, dodging 3 more strikes. He landed on his feet and skidded a few feet back due to his momentum, and many figures dropped into the clearing, trapping him from all sides. He recognized the uniforms they were wearing and knew that Rifu was the one who sent them. Naruto's cerulean orbs narrowed and the surprise in his eyes turned into seriousness when he saw the lime green liquid coating the swords of the soldiers. Poison, the exhausted shinobi thought. He saw a drop of the odd-colored liquid fall from a soldier's sword and fall on the forest ground. Naruto tensed as he saw the grass and plants that surrounded the liquid in 1 meter radius die after they absorbed some of the liquid from the ground, and from the looks of that dead patch of flora, it isn't just the usual run-of-the-mill paralyzing venom that Rifu usually gets from snakes and spiders either. He probably created it himself. He carefully looked at the soldiers who were already in fighting stances, waiting for them to make a move. His eyes darted to the right as he saw a soldier's foot twitch before they rocketed towards him, and a few others of the platoon followed suit. Naruto ducked for a second as a kick flew above his head. He then moved his body slightly to the left and then the right as the 2 who aimed a punch to his head went past him and stumbled into the ground. He closed his eyes and fell onto another handstand and spun around with great velocity, his legs pointing outward, kicking the 8 humans who had attempted to charge at him away. Flipping back onto his feet, Naruto opened his eyes and observed the humans around him again. He may have disabled a few of them, but there was still a lot left. His opponents were slowly edging closer towards him. He bent his knees and lowered himself into a stance as he reluctantly reached for the scabbard strapped to his back, grasping the handle of the sheathed blade hidden by his cloak. As much as he didn't want to use the weapon against humans, he didn't have a choice but to do so in this situation as the group was already charging at him once more. Instead of having a few of their members attack at different openings, they chose to attack as one. Naruto quickly pulled his weapon out and held the one-sided blade horizontally, blocking 3 downward slashes. Its dark gray metal shone under the moonlight. The sword's guard had the appearance of a golden fox head with small gems for eyes, one deep blue with the other scarlet red, and was made to make it seem as if the blade was coming out of the head's open jaws. The kanji for guardian engraved on one side of the metal, while the other had the kanji for demon. The sword's pommel was a miniature version of the Shinigami's head. It was golden like the fox head, but it had ominous, pitch-black eyes. Naruto clenched his right hand, which was wrapped around the sword's blood-red grip, and his left hand tensed against the blunt side of the blade as the 3 soldiers tried to put more force into their attacks. Before jumping back, and a barrage of attacks was sent at the blonde, Naruto was dodging as best as he could in his condition, parrying multiple strikes, ducking down and pivoting from left to right, barely evading any serious injuries, and had managed to take a few of his opponents down. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough, as his adversaries were able to cut him multiple times, and he could feel himself getting weaker as the poison started to affect him. He noticed his vision was blurring. His muscles were weakening and he found it getting harder to move away from the sharp, metal weapons. Damn, move, body! Why won't you move faster? he yelled in his mind. He started to lose feeling on his arms and placed the sword back into its sheath. His eyes were becoming heavier, and he fell to a knee. He saw Rifa's men surround him and advance towards him once more. His vision was about to go black before a loud roar made everything pause, and half of the soldiers flew past him because of the force of the call. But in a stroke of bad luck, one of the human swords slashed his stomach as they went by. Naruto could only see a blur of red as a large shadow appeared and towered over him. "Kit! Nisan," he croaked weakly, before falling forwards, and flashed back. Kurama shook his head out of his thoughts, and focused back on getting his little brother help as soon as possible. The Bijou saw the end of the tree line as well as the sun slowly rising in the horizon. He burst through the trees and skidded to a stop on sand. "This is the beach that we were planning on using as a shortcut." Kurama's eyes widened in recognition. He heard a loud yell come from the trees behind him, and he jumped onto the water without hesitation. Chakra surging through his legs, he went back to finding help as fast as possible. He flinched slightly when he heard a harsh cough from his back and pushed more and more chakra to his paws. The fox's speed increased greatly and water sprayed behind him as he rushed towards Beach City. "Come on, how far is this place?" After around 10 minutes of running, Kurama finally saw a silhouette of a tall mountain with an odd statue of a woman facing to his left carved onto its side and a lighthouse on top and a beach underneath it. In a few seconds he found himself at the beach. He then leapt as high as he could and landed beside the lighthouse, gently. His tails wrapped around Naruto and laid him against the wall of the tall structure and looked over the young man's wounds. "Looks like Rifu's goons managed to give him a couple of cuts before I arrived." Kurama looked at the slice on his little brother's stomach and winced, knowing that his Jinchuriki had sustained that injury because of his actions, and flinched when the injured male coughed out greenish blood. "I guess his body is pushing the poison out of his system thanks to the healing ability he got from me, and I can feel my chakra trying to help heal him. But Rifa must have accounted for this during the poison's creation if it's taking this long. With the poison already being slowly taken care of, the biggest threat to him right now is blood loss. He's already lost a lot of the stuff." The nine-tailed fox closed his eyes and frantically searched for the closest human home. "The inhabitants of this area will no doubt have something that can help slow his bleeding. Even if it's just a towel, it will still help." Kurama muttered. He was shocked when he felt an odd chakra signature underneath him. He went to the cliff face and saw the odd statue of a four-armed woman, and more importantly, the house situated under it. The fox jumped down and went through the house's window, frantically looking around for anything that could help with his brother's current predicament, while unknowingly waking the house's only occupant. A little boy woke up from his slumber when he heard a very loud crash towards his right. He scrambled down his bed and peered over the edge of the ledge where his bedroom was at, and was surprised to see a very large, red and slightly wet nine-tailed fox desperately searching for something in his house. While most children would be scared, this child only seemed to be curious about the creature that was bounding around and creating a general mess in his home. "Hello?" the boy asked timidly. The fox froze, its long, rabbit-like ears twitched, and it turned its head towards the now-awake boy and tilted its head inquiringly while staring the boy in the eyes. "My name's Steven. Why did you break that window, and what are you looking for?" "You're making a mess." The fox blinked at the curly-haired boy for a few seconds, noting that he was dressed in pajamas, before replying to the now-named Steven's questions. "I apologize for not only waking you from your sleep but for destroying your property as well, young one. I am in a hurry. I must find something that can help my injured brother." Steven was amazed when he heard the fox talk to him, before his mind registered that the fox was looking for something that could help with injuries, and he then jumped off his ledge onto the couch nearby. "Oh. Well, when I get hurt, Pearl gets this first aid kit thing. It has lots of stuff in it. Maybe whatever you're looking for is in there," Steven said, running towards the kitchen. He opened one of the drawers, pulled out a square container with a red cross at the front, and then held it out for the fox. "Here you go." Kurama opened his jaws and was about to take the box out of the boy's hands when a bright light that suddenly flashed inside the house made him pause. When the light subsided, he heard 3 cries of Steven. His slitted eyes turned to where the flash had come from and saw 3 women getting into fighting stances and were armed with different weapons. "I don't have time for this," he growled mentally before using his jaws to take the square, metal box out of Steven's hands. He went back out through the window he broke and hurried back to Naruto, ignoring the young boy's cry of "wait." The women weren't going to let the Kurama escape so easily and went after him, They had just returned from a late-night mission and had wanted to relax. But they certainly weren't expecting to see the house in such a mess, with a large, bloody fox looking at Stephen with its jaws wide open. Two of them ran out and jumped after the fox while the little boy managed to stop one of them. "Wait, Pearl," the boy pleaded, holding on the pale woman's leg. She paused and looked down at Stephen. "Stephen, what are you doing?" "I need to get to that fox. He tried to hurt you," Pearl said, trying to pry the child off her leg without accidentally harming him with the spear in her hand. "But it didn't try to hurt me. He said that he was just looking for something that could help his brother," Stephen cried, tightening his grip around the woman's leg. That made Pearl pause. "Wait," said. "That fox talked to you, Pearl. We're going to need your help." The spear-wielding woman was cut off as he heard one of the other ladies call out to her. She finally was able to take the young boy off her leg while he was distracted by the yell. "Just wait here, Stephen," she said, before going out the door, and jumped up the cliff face when she saw a shadow gesture to her from the top. Pearl gasped when she saw the injured, bloody and barely conscious young man resting against the lighthouse. The fox was nudging the man's cheek with its nose, the first aid kit still in its maw. The injured male brought his hand up to the fox's snout. He managed to form a weak eye smile before a harsh cough was heard and blood flew through his face mask. The man's eyes turned to the strangers by the cliff face before he passed out. The fox followed his line of sight, finally noticing the three, dropping the metal container. Its eyes narrowed and moved to the front of the man protectively while growling. Noticing this, Pearl made her weapon disappear and took a few steps towards the fox. "Easy, I just want to take a look at him. I won't hurt him. I just want to see if I can help him," Pearl said slowly, her hands held up in a placating manner. She saw it gain a slightly surprised look after seeing the pearl embedded in her forehead before the fox looked her in the eye, making her feel as if it was peering into her soul. After a few seconds, the animal nodded and startled her and the other two by speaking. "I will allow it, but only you are permitted to go closer. I do not trust you, and if you do anything to hurt him, I will erase you," it grunted, lowering its stance before moving away. Pearl went to the blonde's side and examined his cuts, which glowed a slightly greenish color. She turned to the fox. "We're going to have to clean his wounds along with the blood and grime on him before wrapping them in bandages to prevent infection. Infection is the last thing he needs in this condition. We also need to see if we can analyze the poison in his body and check if there is anything we can do about it. But to do this, we need to bring him inside, and your help as well as garnet and amethysts would also be very useful. Are you fine with that?" she asked the quadruped. "Fine," Kurama replied. Although he didn't sense any negative emotions in the three, he was still suspicious of them. With their experience with humans in this world, it was better to be safe than sorry. Yet something in Kurama told him that these three weren't exactly human. But as long as his little brother would get the help he desperately needed, he would let these strangers go near him. 2 hours later, the now clean and bandaged Naruto was laying on Stephen's couch. His ripped cloak, hoodie and undershirt was off, along with his sword and scabbard, showing his heavily bandaged torso. Kurama was sat on his haunches beside him, no longer covered in blood, and was standing vigil over his currently vulnerable little brother. He managed to find out the identities of the three women. The short, purple-skinned one was snow-white hair, wearing a dark gray tank top with a black singlet underneath, black pants which had ripped holes the shape of stars on the knees, and white shoes, was called Amethyst. The tall, maroon-skinned, sunglass-wearing woman with square-shaped ebony hair and wore a bodysuit was called Garnet, and the final female, who was pale with a peach-colored pixie cut and wore an outfit that reminded him of what those humans who called themselves ballerinas wore, was called Pearl. Kurama knew these three were not human. Their appearance gave it away. But the most convincing fact was the strange chakra signatures that they let out. He couldn't put his finger or paw on it, but although their energy signals were similar to what he sensed from other humans, theirs were unique and felt just like the energy signatures that came from the small orb in his Ototo's chest. From what he could sense, the energy they used was similar to chakra, but had a few major differences. An example would be that they would never suffer from depletion of the energy, but the drawback was that the amount of things they could do with it was limited, not to mention that the energy they used was weaker. Compared to chakra, his thoughts went to the little boy Stephen. He seemed to have an odd mixture of both chakra and whatever those other three used. Kurama sighed, thinking about how long it would take for his brother to wake up and how bored he was before his long ears twitched, and he was brought out of his thoughts when he heard the two others who were inside the house. whispered to themselves. Steven was still outside with Amethyst. They had decided to get him out 2 hours ago so that he couldn't see the condition Naruto was in when they took him into the house. I don't know, Garnet. There's just something weird about them. I mean, that human shouldn't have survived that many injuries, especially with that large slice on his stomach. His body is even pushing the poison out by itself. I took a look at the poison. 1 drop would have been able to kill 2 elephants. He should have been dead the moment he got even the tiniest of scratches. He even had a sword hidden behind his cloak. Pearl whispered to the taller gem in the kitchen, ignorant of the fact that Kurama could hear every word they said. Yes, that definitely causes suspicion. I have tried to use my future vision to see what they could be up to, but I can't seem to see anything at all. Yet if I try to use it without taking them into account, it works properly. But if they were here for any other reason than because one of them was hurt, then the fox would have done something to us by now. It is highly intelligent. The fact that it can speak a human language is proof of that, Garnet replied, glancing at the fox's back, noting that it had 9 tails. The fact that they had so little information on them worried her, and made her wonder who exactly they were, and what happened to the 2 that had resulted in the unconscious males sustaining such serious injuries. We should talk to them once the human wakes up. We know so little about them. If they show signs of hostility, then we'll take care of them. Yes, I do want to know about the slightly torn bandages around the man's chest as well as that bloody mask on his face. I tried to take them off to replace them, but the fox stopped me as if they were some sort of important secret, Pearl said as she nodded in agreement when the door suddenly slammed open. Pearl and Garnet along with Kurama turned their heads towards the door, only to see Steven underneath Amethyst as she had tackled the little boy to the ground and was currently giving him a noogie. Ha! Amethyst! Stop it! Steven laughed, trying to get the purple girl off of him. What, you can't handle my awesomeness, Steven? She smirked in return, before finally standing up and pulling the boy back onto his feet. Steven giggled for a few seconds, before his eyes landed on Kurama and quickly ran towards him. Hey, Mr. Fox, you're back. He jumped onto Kurama's back, wrapping his short arms around his furry neck, somehow firing question after question in a single breath. I've got tons of questions. Like, what's your name? Who's your brother? Why was he hurt? Why are you red? Why are you so big? Why do you have 9 ta? The young child was cut off when Kurama picked him up using his tails and placed him down on the floor while chuckling. Deciding to humor the innocent child, he answered his questions. At ease, little one. Now, as for your questions, my name is Kurama. The one lying on your couch is called Naruto, and bad people had attacked him while I was sleeping. Why I am red and have 9 tails. I was born this way. As for my size, I guess you could say that I am special. He shrunk into the size of a normal fox kit before returning to his previous height. Steven looked up at Kurama in amazement. Whoa, that's so cool. Can you please give me a ride on your back? Please, 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 he pleaded, giving Kurama the puppy dog eyes. Said Fox just chuckled once more before lifting Steven with his tails and placed the boy on his back. Grateful that he had cleaned the blood off of it earlier, and stood up from his sitting position, he ran around the inside of the house, jumping a few times, his tails making sure that the laughing child didn't fall off. Maybe waiting for Naruto to wake up won't be so boring after all. 2 weeks later, Kurama was woken up from the nap he was taking underneath the now fixed window when he heard groaning coming from the couch. He rolled over and ignored it before going back to sleep. Where am I? Someone croaked out. Upon hearing the voice, Kurama's head sprung up, he leapt to his feet and was now wide awake. He turned towards his little brother, who was hissing in pain as he slowly sat up on the couch. He quickly went to help him up, and made sure that he was in a position that didn't reopen the wound on his stitched stomach. Kit, you're finally awake! He yelled, nuzzling his head against the blonde's chest. What? Did you think that the poison was enough to kill me? I'm invincible. Naruto had tried to punch the air, but pain had suddenly shot from his stomach. Damn it, take it easy. You just woke up from a 2-week sleep. If you don't, I'll knock you back into unconsciousness, Kurama growled. Right now, we're in Beach City. The 4 inhabitants of this home were generous enough to let us stay here while you were out of it. The temple door opened. The 3 gems walked out to investigate the commotion that they had heard. They saw the conscious Naruto talking to Kurama and walked over towards them. The bandaged blonde blushed slightly at the sight of a certain pale gem. You're awake now. While we will allow you to stay here as you are still injured, We need to ask a few questions first, Pearl said. Yeah, like what the heck happened to you guys that got you all jacked up? Amethyst asked bluntly. Yes, and who or what are you really? We analyzed the poison that was affecting you. You should have been dead long before you had reached the lighthouse. There is also the matter of Kurama being able to speak as well as change his size. Garnet spoke in a stoic voice. Naruto scratched the back of his head, chuckling nervously, and chose to reply. After all, they did help take care of him. Well, to answer those questions in order, we were heading towards Beach City and took a break. Kurama dozed off and I left to go stretch my legs when I was attacked by strange sword-wielding humans wearing blue jumpsuits. As for the poison, well, I'm not your average human. My body heals quite quickly from any sort of damage. From what Kurama told me, it's been 2 weeks since I was attacked, and considering the fact that I still have this slice in my stomach, then that means that my healing probably focused on the poison, which is why I'm not dead. Kurama has been able to talk ever since he was born, but the changing size thing I can't really tell you much about. No offense, but although you guys let us stay here while I was unconscious, we still don't trust you that much. We've had experience in the past with trusting others on the subject. And let's just say that it didn't end up well, he answered, trying to not be too specific in his answers. Alright, but do you know why these sword-wielding humans attacked you? It was Pearl who asked this question. If there were humans out there that would do that much damage to another human being, she was worried at what they were aiming to do. Yeah, it has something to do with the thing that lets Kurama change sizes. We had befriended a human and had trusted him with the information after staying with him for a few years. Long story short, things happened and now we're running away from him. He's the one who sent those other humans, I guess. Now you know why we aren't that enthusiastic about trusting others. The last sentence was said with a slight undertone of sadness. The 3 gems could only blink at this, not knowing what to say before Garnet spoke up. Okay, that answers all of our questions. We will leave you alone for now. You still need rest. But know this. While you two may stay here while Naruto recovers, if you show signs of hostility, we will not hesitate to put you down, she said before they went back into the temple. Naruto and Kurama stared at the closing door for a minute before they turned to each other. You noticed it too, didn't you? Yes, they are definitely not human, but those gems and their energy is similar to... Naruto's words drifted off as he looked down at his bandaged torso. He moved the bandages around his chest and stared at the half-tanzanite and half-red beryl orb embedded above his heart. You want to what? A certain fox whispered loudly to his little brother. He was sat in front of Naruto, who was hunched over on the couch. The young man's elbows were propped on his knees and his chin was resting on his steepled fingers as he looked down at the ground. His blood-covered mask was changed into a clean one. It had been around 2 hours since the gems had interrogated Naruto and the clock showed 6:24 p.m. Since then, he and Kurama had been discussing ideas about how to deal with Rifu. After sifting through multiple ways that they could handle the situation, Naruto had thought of a plan. A preposterous and downright near impossible plan, but a plan nonetheless. Unless you have a better idea, you know that it's the only way we can do this. You must remember that killing others is frowned upon in this world and the consequences of doing so are severe, he replied harshly, his voice also lowered like Kurama's so that the others could not overhear their conversation. But using that jutsu? It took that Hokage nearly 10 years to create that technique and actually make it work, yet it still has many flaws. What you're saying is that you want to change the most crucial factor it needs and you yourself know that by taking it away, you're essentially creating a whole new jutsu rather than editing one. It's ludicrous. It could take us the same amount of time it took to create the technique in the first place, possibly even more just to do so. Maybe, but unlike its original creator, we have things that can help speed up the jutsu's recreation drastically. You have had 2 Uzumaki Jinchuriki before me, who themselves were seal masters, so you have lots of information on sealing. Not to mention that one of which lived in the same timeline as this technique's original creator and helped in its production. There is also the fact that not only am I an Uzumaki seal master, we could also ask them to help us with this. If those 2 accept, then that would make this project a lot easier, the blonde reasoned. Although he didn't like the jutsu, he knew he would have to use it. Kurama knew this too. Rifa wouldn't listen to them. But the duo knew who he would listen to. If they were going to try to make Rifa see reason, they would need their assistance when speaking to him. Fine, we will work on this for now, but if a more efficient way to handle this pops up, then we will do that instead. alright? Kurama sighed in resignation. Still, before we start on this, you need to rest. While the poison is mostly gone, your body is still healing from its effects, so your other injuries will have to take at least a week to fully heal. Kurama's ears twitched and Naruto looked up from the floor when their sharp ears heard rapid footsteps moving up the stairs outside as someone headed towards the house. The door opened and a black-haired little boy who was around the height of Amethyst's shoulders walked in. He wearing a pink t-shirt that had a gold star stitched on the front along with dark blue pants and pink sandals. His eyes widened and stars appeared inside them as a large smile grew on his face when he saw that Naruto was awake, and immediately ran towards him excitedly. Hello? My name's Steven Universe. Kurama told me yours was Naruto. He also said that you were hurt because you guys were fighting other people before you were brought here by him and the crystal gems. That means you know how to fight, right? If yes, can you please show me some tricks? Also, I haven't seen you around here before. Are you a tourist? If you are, then where are you from? He asked. His eyes were shining as he was eager to learn more about the mysterious, injured, masked man who was brought into his home. So they call themselves the Crystal Gems, eh? Naruto thought, storing the information into his head. His sweat dropped. It also seems that this kid can't say tourist that well. Yes, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. You are right to say that I am not from here. But I am not a tourist. Where I come from is a place that I will not be able to return to. Though the language that my former home uses is what you people call Japanese, he said, ruffling the boy's hair with his hand as he smiled at the child's innocence. As for being able to fight, yes, I do know how to defend myself. I would show you, but as you can see, I am not in the right shape to do anything at the moment. Cool. Hey, since you can't really move yet, can you teach me some attack moves when you're not hurt anymore? Pliawea was? He looked up at the blonde, his eyes sparkling even more. Naruto just chuckled at this and ruffled Steven's hair once more. We'll see, kiddo, we'll see. The temple door slid open as the gems entered the room and Steven found himself in a chokehold while he was being given a noogie by Amethyst. Garnet and Pearl were walking calmly towards them. They had small smiles as they shook their heads at their antics. Hey, Steven! About time you got back from Greg's place. Just in time for dinner too. So, how was spending time with your dad? You had fun? Amethyst snickered, until she was pulled off of the boy by Garnet. If his dad is here, then why doesn't live with him instead? There is also the fact that his mother seems to be missing. He thought about asking them why before choosing to keep silent and observe the four who shared the same aura as the orb embedded into his chest. Come on, Steven, it's time to eat. 3 hours later. The rest of the day went on quite normally and the clock now showed 9:03 p.m. Naruto was laying on the couch, his arms behind his head as he looked up at the roof while Kurama already fast asleep by his feet. Tonight there would be no aggressive wild animals, no assault squads from Rifu, and no looking behind his back in case of followers. It was a nice change of pace for Naruto. He breathed in deeply before exhaling as he relaxed and reviewed his day. The most negative thing that happened to him today would be the distrustful gazes that the 3 other adults in the house often gave him. He knew that although he had told them the truth when they had asked him questions, the crystal gems were still suspicious of him, if their wary glances were anything to go by. But he understood that their suspicion was only because they didn't want anything to happen to those precious to them, Steven to be precise. Although he wasn't in the elemental nations anymore, he still practiced the skills that every ninja had to learn. One of the most important to learn was knowing how to read your enemy to either gauge how powerful they were or to see if they had negative intentions. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, he had already mastered the skill at a young age. If he hadn't, he most likely wouldn't have lived past his 7th birthday. The blue-eyed boy's face gained a slight frown when he remembered his childhood before he regained his composure, and his thoughts drifted back to the crystal gems, from how the 3 females held themselves. They were definitely experienced in fighting. If he were to judge from the amount of energy they expelled, they would probably be around Jonin level in his old world. With their familiarity to combat, he could tell that they had been through life or death situations before, and judging from the emotions he saw they tried to hide behind their eyes, they knew about the pain of the loss. He could also tell that they cared quite a lot for little Steven, given that when he let the child sit on his shoulders or whenever he interacted with the kid they had tensed and looked ready to rush at him. Should he have caused the boy any harm, Naruto's eyes softened, and he smiled as he thought about how lucky the Steven was to have such protective caretakers. So, there really are others like me, huh? I thought they were just pulling my leg. He rubbed the gem that was hidden under the bandages on his chest. The blonde reminisced about the happy times with his late family, his small smile still on his face before it was wiped away as he flinched when he felt his eyelids become heavier. His body was pleading for him to sleep. Well, this day has been pretty good so far. I just hope that I can have some peaceful rest after all these years. Yeah right. Naruto thought sadly before letting his vision go black, not knowing that Kurama had woken up and heard what he had thought. Kit, 2:46 a.m. A pair of alert azure orbs snapped open in the darkness, and Naruto sprang up from his position on the couch, panting heavily. He sat with his back against the staircase before he twisted his body and let his feet touch the floor as he placed his head into his hands, muttering, "Just like the other days, huh?" He breathed slowly, trying to relax his tense body. Too busy trying to calm down to notice that the temple door had slid open and a thin figure was walking out. Ah, that's better, Pearl thought. Her eyes were closed as she stretched her arms upwards and bent her spine back slightly, feeling some joints pop. She had been meditating under her favorite tree ever since Steven went to bed, and her body felt quite stiff due to not moving for quite a while. She let her arms down, her joints now feeling looser than they had been, and opened her eyes, which then widened in surprise when she saw Naruto awake. What is he doing up? Naruto? Why are you still awake? It isn't healthy for a human to deprive themselves of sleep, especially one in your condition, Pearl asked, voicing her thoughts. She saw Naruto flinch, his head snapping up, his gaze turning from the floor to her. She could see the shock evident in his cerulean eyes. I just have trouble sleeping sometimes, that's all, he said, cursing himself in his mind for stuttering. I'll get back to sleep soon. I just wake up at sudden moments sometimes. After what just happened with me ending up like this, it's quite hard to sleep peacefully, you know. I guess you're right, she replied, a bit doubtful about his response. But you really should get to sleep. Rest is very important to someone who is as injured as you. Yeah, I'll get back to sleep right away. He was about to lay back down on couch before a thought occurred in his head. Hang on, why are you up? Although you aren't injured, wouldn't you need some shut-eye as well? Pearl stiffened and struggled to come up with a response, her unease growing even more when Naruto narrowed his eyes warily. Dang it, what am I supposed to say? Well, I'm just used to not sleeping that much. I don't need the energy that sleep gives, either do garnet and amethyst, the peach-haired gem answered, hoping that the whiskered male would drop the subject. Don't need the energy, eh? Probably because of that orb in your forehead. She grew even more nervous when the Uzumaki didn't reply, especially because his eyes were still narrowed in suspicion. They stared at each other for a few minutes before Naruto relented. Alright, well, like you said, I need sleep. Good night. Good night. Pearl did a mental sigh of relief as she saw him finally move to go back to sleep. Oh geez, that was close. I just hope he won't be curious and will start to ask questions, she thought. Naruto's mindscape. Kit, you know that the pale vixen was right about you holding back on rest. Although staying in your mindscape helps with regaining your strength, meditating for hours isn't a good replacement for sleeping. Kurama sat in front of his cross-legged little brother in the middle of a forest clearing. He was happy that his Otoro had changed the appearance of his mind years ago. It was no longer a massive sewer area. It was now a large, grassy field that had 3 mountains in the background surrounded by a lush, green forest with trees nearly half the height of one of Kurama's legs when the fox was in his actual size. I know, and I know, but what can I do? At this point in time, it's the only way I can go about this, especially when you won't let me take those sleeping pills that I got a while back, the Jinchuriki said, looking down at the grass, not wanting to look Kurama in the eye. I don't allow you because you plan on taking them every night. Healing ability or not, taking those pills that often isn't healthy for you. You may not age, or gain any sickness, but you still need proper rest. His older brother growled in reply. Alright, I understand. Naruto continued to look down dejectedly, seeing the expression on the young man's face. Kurama's fierce look softened before he sighed. I don't know why you still get nightmares of that day after all these years. You know it wasn't your fault, and that they don't blame you for it. Do you really still feel guilty about their deaths? Even though they had already told you themselves that they never even thought of you as the cause of their demise? The Bija asked, sighing again when his little brother just kept his gaze on the ground beneath them before leaving the mindscape. Real world, 8:14 a.m. First day of Naruto's recovery week. The fox's eyes fluttered open in the real world. He saw that the crystal gems were already awake. Garnet was leaning against the fridge. Amethyst and Steven were sitting at the dinner table. The boy eating a bowl of cereal and Pearl was stood beside the sink. He did a cat-like stretch, then shook his body similar to how dogs did when they were wet, before moving towards his brother's head. Naruto, time for you to wake up, the others are already here, he told his brother through their mental link, using his snout to nuzzle his sibling's face, his fur poking the other male's face. All right, I'm up, the whiskered blonde said, using a hand to push the fox's muzzle away while the other tried to rub the exhaustion out of his eyes. Naruto tried to stand up, pushing a hand against the side of the staircase, but was forced to lurch forward as pain shot through his stomach and was pushed back down onto the couch by an irritated Kurama. He turned towards the 4 residents of the house sitting at the dinner table who had stopped and looked at him when he tried to stand. Good morning. Morning. Sup. Good morning to you too. Morning, Naruto. Naruto smiled slightly under his mask at the difference of their responses. Garnet still spoke in a stoic voice. Amethyst answered casually, then shoved an empty cereal box in her mouth. Pearl's voice had a bit of formality in it, and Steven just yelled and had a huge smile on his face after. He watched Pearl pick up the bowl and spoon on the kitchen counter and walked over towards him. Here, have some breakfast. I'm not sure what you usually eat, but this is the only food that we have for this time of day, she said, placing the bowl in his left hand and the spoon on his right. He looked down and saw that the bowl was filled with cereal. No, it's fine, cereal is actually quite good. I don't usually have anything much for breakfast anyway, and that's when I actually get to have some, he chuckled, placing the spoon in the bowl and scratching the back of his head with his eyes closed, not noticing Amethyst and Steven's shared glance, the slightly worried expression Pearl sent him. Kurama's saddened look and Garnet's raised eyebrow. He stopped scratching his head and saw that everyone looking at him. Is something wrong? Pearl snapped out of her slight trance and asked a question. What do you mean when I actually to have some? What's preventing you from being able to do something as important as eating? Well, you know, those humans after me, he replied, slightly wishing that he hadn't revealed that little bit of information. Kurama and I were quite paranoid out there. On most days we usually slept in the mornings and woke up at around 5 o'clock afternoon to continue traveling in the night. Garnet narrowed her eyes. These humans, will they come here to get to you? Naruto blinked, not knowing what to say. Luckily, Kurama was expecting them to ask something like this. After all, strangers that have assassins being sent after them would obviously cause danger to those who they had interacted with. Well, the only reason that they had managed to find us is because we had been using a city as a shortcut. We saw people assaulting a man in an alley for information on something and took them down. Unfortunately, those people had been asking about us, and had immediately informed Rifu about our location, who then sent the soldiers around the area after us. We had lost them in a forest far away from here and used a beach to escape. He only stationed soldiers in large cities and busy places. If he sent them into areas where people know each other quite closely, such as Beach City, they would be seen as suspicious. So no, he won't be coming here, Kurama interjected, smirking inside as he heard his little brother sigh in relief through their link. The square-haired woman raised an eyebrow before nodding in acceptance, and turning towards the odd, circular pad which seemed to be made out of crystal. After seeing Amethyst grab a plate to literally eat, and Pearl tried to stop her from doing so, Naruto began to eat his cereal with Steven doing the same, no one noticing that the spoon was going through the cloth of his face mask, a genjutsu being the only thing keeping the others from seeing his whiskered cheeks. He saw the 3 females go to the pad 10 minutes later, disappearing in a flash of light, leaving him, Steven and Kurama alone in the house. A few minutes later, he finished eating. He tried to stand up to put the bowl in the sink but was stopped by Kurama's tails, which grabbed the bowl in his hand, and his elder brother went to the sink for him. Sighing, he leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. His ears twitched slightly when the sound of flip-flops reached his them. Cobalt irises moved downward only to see a certain curly-haired little boy. "Hello there, young one, do you need something?" he asked. You said last night that you wouldn't be able to move that much and the crystal gems already left to do gem stuff. So you want to play video games and watch TV in my room with me? The boy looked up at him. His eyes were wide and he had managed to somehow replace his pupils with stars, Naruto just chuckled at the child's adorableness. Of course, but he paused, looking up on the ledge where Steven's room was. Your room's up there. Kurama, mind giving us some help? He heard a chuckle emanate from his brother through their connected minds. The red quadruped picked him up gently with his tails and jumped up onto the ledge. He placed the bandaged Naruto against the foot of Steven's bed before laying down to the blonde's right. The little boy scrambled up the stairs with 2 large bags of popcorn, grabbing 2 controllers. He placed one in Naruto's hand as he turned the TV on and put the disc for the game Golf Quest multiplayer in the console. They stayed on Steven's ledge for hours, laughing at certain parts of the game before they finally finished the game and took a break during the afternoon. Naruto looked down at the boy sitting beside him, his face forming a grin. Kurama knew that it was the same grin that he hadn't seen in years. He ruffled the boy's hair and spoke. Well, the game's done. It seems though that it is time for lunch, he said, looking at the clock that now showed 1:52 p.m. He then turned to the empty paper bags that had held the popcorn earlier. Now the question is, what are we going to eat? Well, usually I go to the town and either get some fries or pizza. Sometimes both, Steven smiled, staring up at the older male. His sentence made both brothers look at the child. They let you go outside alone? That is quite irresponsible, Naruto nearly yelled. He and Kurama were stumped as to why they would actually allow him to do so. Well, yeah, everyone in this town knows each other. No one really gives other people trouble. The ones who do are the people Pearl said were 2 to 2. Tourists? Kurama interjected. Yeah, those. The Uzumaki remained silent and thought about what he had just heard. He didn't really like the idea of Steven going out alone, even if he was used to it. But he couldn't cook anything in his condition, and Kurama obviously couldn't due to being a quadruped and all, so he made a compromise. The 20-year-old reached into his pants pocket, pulling out his wallet. He took out $50 and gave it to the little boy. Steven, could you go get us some food? Kurama and I aren't picky, but we do eat quite a lot, so you could just get whatever you'd like. You can go wild with whatever you buy. But here's the catch. Although you go out by yourself often, I'm not that comfortable with that fact, so Kurama is going to have to go with you, alright? The kid's attention switched from his face to Kurama's when he saw the fox nod. Okay, I promise to be back as soon as possible. Steven beamed, letting out a whoa. When Kurama changed into a brown, one-tailed fox and then ran outside with the normal-looking fox in tow, with Steven and Kurama. Steven laughed as he ran ahead towards fish stew pizza. His eyes closed in his joy while Kurama kept an eye on him. The fox walked calmly behind the eager child, holding a filled plastic bag in his maw. They had already been to Beach City. Walk Fries had bought 3 large bags of fried bits. Steven was very happy. There were finally people who he could spend time with. Sure, the Crystal Gems and his dad always tried to spend as much time as they could with him, but their professions as Earth's protectors and the car wash manager respectively took away most of their time. Hey, come on, you know you want to go out with me. I said no already. Though the voices reached his ears, the boy was too lost in his own thoughts to notice the taller figures in front of him, and crashed into someone, making him fall on his butt. Watch where you're going, twerp. Steven, are you okay? The angry yell from an unfamiliar voice went past his head, but the concerned shout from Kiki Pizza made his eyes snap open and look up. He saw 5 unknown figures looking at him, 3 of them male and the other 2 female, dressed in an odd, white uniforms with black belts tied around their waists. He turned to the right to see Kiki. The nice older girl who always took his orders and kept him company while he waited, was held against the fish stew pizza wall. One of the oddly dressed males, who he distinctly remembered as the one who he crashed into, had his left hand placed to the left of her head as his right was clenched into a fist beside his hip. Hey, Kiki! I'm fine, what's going on? Steven tilted his head in confusion. Before Kiki could say anything, the boy in front of her interrupted. Gah, beat it, kid! Whatever's happening here ain't none of your business. The young universe looked up at the older boy. He noticed that he had black hair and dark brown eyes that had an angry look in them as a frown was etched onto his face. But whatever you're doing is making Kiki nervous, and I can't leave yet. Me and Kurama still have to get some pizza. The strange, angry boy made a motion to hit Steven before his eyes widened. Wait, Kurama? He asked before the 5 strangers and Kiki flinched when they heard a fierce growl. Yeah, Kurama. Steven smiled innocently, pointing behind them. The 6 older children slowly turned around and saw a large, growling and very angry fox. Instantly, without hesitation, the boy along with the 4 with him ran away in fear, yelling, "This isn't over." Without looking back, Kurama huffed and sat on his haunches, his enraged expression transformed into a mildly miffed one, his gaze still on the 5 retreating figures. What isn't over? Stephen thought before he walked up to Kurama and hugged his left leg, giggling. Hey big guy, about time you got here. Black-haired child turned towards to the frozen pizza twin. Kurama, this is Kiki, she always takes my orders whenever I go here. Kiki meet Kurama. He's living with me and the crystal gems for now. Hello? She stuttered fearfully, pressing herself as close as she could against the wall as said fox just nodded in greeting. Kiki! We got a big order today, 1 meat lover's pizza, 1 Hawaiian pizza, 1 pepperoni pizza and 1 vegetarian pizza, all large. Kiki stared at the animal Stephen was hugging so casually for a few seconds before sprinting into the shop to get their order, managing a shaky and barely audible okay. The other 2 waited outside as Kurama was too big to fit through the door. When the hard-working pizza twin came back out, she was greeted with the sight of Stephen being tossed up in the air, caught, then being thrown again by the smirking brown fox's large tail, the child laughing as the fox did so. When she was finally noticed by the duo, Stephen was launched so high that he had went past the fish stew pizza roof and was caught by the back of his shirt collar by Kurama's fangs on the way down. The flip-flop wearing boy grabbed the 4 boxes of pizza, placing the payment into the still mesmerized girl's open hands. See ya, Kiki. Stephen giggled as he felt the warmth of the fry bits against his back. Okay Kurama, mush, with Naruto. Those 2 are taking quite a while, Naruto thought, staring out the window by Stephen's bed. He faced the TV again, laying his head on bed. He was about to try to take a quick nap to alleviate his boredom when a sudden flash of white light filled his vision, and he heard an odd swoosh sound along with Pearl, Garnet, and Amethyst's voices. Well, that thing won't be bothering anyone anymore, he heard Pearl say. At least by bubbling them they won't reform, Garnet added. Yeah, mission time is over, now, why Stephen? Amethyst voiced, bellowing out the last part. She spoke up again after not hearing a response, scanning the house for any sign of the boy Stephen. Sighing, he made himself known, diverting the trio's attention towards him. Stephen isn't here. Where is he then? Garnet inquired if you did something to him. Oh, don't go around jumping to conclusions like that. The kid's out getting lunch. I gave him some money and sent him out because, as you can see, I am not able to move freely at the moment. If you're worried about his safety then relax. I sent Kurama to watch over him, Naruto drawled out lazily. The gem was about to ask more questions when Kurama burst through the door. Still holding Stephen by the collar using his jaws, said little boy gasped in happiness at the sight of the crystal gems. You guys are back early. Kurama, who was back to his usual form, released him and he dropped down onto his feet. He ran towards the 3 women with the pizza boxes still in his hands. You're just in time for lunch. Are you guys gonna join us? Heck yeah, okay. Everyone's eyes turned to the only gem who hadn't responded. Pearl never liked to eat, mostly due to the process of digestion their physical forms had to undergo, although she did eat a bit once in a while. Digestion just felt nauseating to her. She wanted to say no, that she didn't want to eat, but one look at Stephen's puppy dog eyes made her will crumble. Fine, I guess I'll eat as well, she sighed. The little boy's face lit up at her answer. ALRIGHT. Come on, let's eat in my room, that way, we can watch Lonely Blade Eye 2 while we eat. The rest of the day flew past. Any skepticism and wariness they had of each other was forgotten in favor of enjoyment and relaxation. If anyone walked past their area of the beach, boisterous sounds of jokes and laughter could be heard radiating from the secluded home. Again, no one noticing that the food the blonde ate went straight through his mask. Second day of Naruto's recovery week. Naruto and Stephen were laying against Kurama's side as they watched crying breakfast friends. Nissan, do you understand what's happening in this show? The 2 brothers' sweat dropped, staring at the weeping pancake running around on the TV. Your guess is as good as mine, Otuto. They heard laughter and turned the young universe beside them. At least he's happy. The 3 paused their watching of television when they heard the temple door open. Amethyst stepped out, trying to inconspicuously hide the large water balloon behind her back. Keyword would be trying. Hey guys! She yelled, letting out a not-so-subtle mischievous snicker. Can one of you do me a favor and jump down onto the couch for me? The two brothers just deadpanned at the white-haired girl. Does she seriously think that one of us would fall for such an obvious dash? Naruto stopped his mental rant when Steven happily jumped down onto the couch and walked towards Amethyst, who then threw the object at his face. The child's surprised reaction towards the hidden water balloon caused the brothers to face fault, while the purple-skinned gem just fell to the floor and roared in laughter. Ah man, Amethyst! Why do you always gotta prank me? Steven whined. I'll keep on doing tricks like this as long as you're still gullible enough to fall for them, she retorted, still on the floor as her guffaws made her unable to stand up. After a few more minutes of laughter, the gem managed to calm herself. Okay, that was fun, I'll see you three later. She giggled out, going back into the temple, towards her room. The Jinchuriki and Bija pulled their faces off of the ground and gave the mumbling boy an incredulous look from their perch on the ledge. Steven felt that he was being watched and looked towards the two off-worlders. What is it? He asked them, reaching into the cupboard attached to the stairs for a new shirt. You fell for that? It was quite obvious that she was trying to hide something behind her back, with her having to turn around a few times so that she could stop the balloon from dropping, Naruto said, with Kurama nodding in agreement beside him. Steven just looked up at them innocently with wide eyes, now wearing a dry shirt. It was? Man, I never see these things. Steven pouted, his arms crossed in front of him as he plopped down on the floor. Naruto chuckled at him and shared a glance with Kurama, communicating with his brother mentally. So, should we show them why foxes are the most sneakiest and cunning animals in any world? Hee hee, of course we should. Although you're still recovering, that doesn't mean we can't have any fun while waiting. Yes. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Steven went up the stairs only to see that the brothers had shifted their gazes away from each other, and were now looking towards him. The matching mischievous glints in their eyes gave him a foreboding feeling as a chill went up his spine. A few minutes later, okay, that should be it, Naruto muttered, inspecting a thin, nearly invisible string of ninja wire that lead up to the beams above his head as he attached a couple of chakra strings on a few objects. Kurama, are there any faults in the seal? Kurama tilted his head upwards from the ceiling matrix on the floor, drawn just in front of the temple door. Everything seems to be in order. Kai, the Uzumaki whispered in his head with a hand seal, making the array activate and become invisible. Okay, let's go to Steven. The fox picked Naruto up and headed to the porch outside where the boy was currently waiting for them. They crouched underneath the open window, the same one that Kurama had broken when he first arrived. The two siblings focused on the temple door as they felt someone about to activate it. What did you guys do? What's supposed to happen? The little boy beside them whispered. Sure, just wait, Steven. The shinobi grinned when he saw Amethyst walk out of the temple. Perfect. Kai! What the? The seal glowed and the light emanating from it enveloped the short gem, doing its job by casting two genjutsu, one on the confused female and another on the area around her. She shrunk to around the same height as the house's center table, dressed in a purple onesie with a bib around her neck, and was holding a binky in her right hand. Amethyst could only watch as everything around her grew bigger. Oh, was all she could say about her current predicament. The gem tried to walk forwards in her new form, but was only able to crawl. She headed for the warp pad to go to where Garnet and Pearl were for help, but the unnoticed ninja wire in front of her tripped her up. The disturbance made the wire bend and squeeze not only the triggers of multiple water guns that sprayed her with glue but also the many bottles of ketchup and mustard. Once the sticky substances covered her, she panicked and tried to stand up once more only to stumble as she flailed her arms around trying to regain her balance, but ended up falling flat on her face, causing another wire to spring its trap. This time feathers flew out of a knocked-over, huge, plastic tub and were blown towards her by a fan placed on a wooden beam, all of them sticking onto Amethyst. The three observers were having trouble breathing as they held their laughter in. Naruto managed to compose himself enough to use the chakra strings attached to his fingers, pulling a wooden crib that had a sign that read "Oops" down from the roof. Once it was in the middle of the couch area and the kitchen, Naruto placed a hand on the porch floor, pushing chakra into the wood. A hand of wood picked Amethyst up and placed her into the crib, while seals that were written on the crib beforehand activated and created an invisible force field that prevented Amethyst from leaving the crib. Hey! What's the big idea? Let me out, she screamed before the binky was shoved into her mouth, courtesy of a chakra thread. The trio of males now found it very difficult to stop their guffaws from being heard by the enraged gem. The warp pad suddenly glowed as Pearl and Garnet returned from their mission. What happened here? Pearl's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates when she saw that the floor was covered in food condiments, glue and feathers. This place is a mess. Pearl cut herself off as badly stifled giggles started to emanate from both her and Garnet when their eyes landed on the binky-sucking, onesie-wearing, feather, mustard and ketchup-covered baby Amethyst struggling to get out of her prison. After a battle of wills that lasted 8 seconds, the two gems fell to the ground holding their stomachs in laughter. The moment they fell down, the males couldn't hold their amusement anymore either and tumbled down. Their roars of mirth were heard clearly inside the house but were currently ignored. "Ha what kahaha happened to you?" Pearl managed to say through her glee. "Stop laughing and get me out of here." Amethyst pouted, producing the opposite of what she wanted as the two usually calm females laughed even louder. Pearl took out a camera from her gem, snapped a photo of the memorable occasion before putting the camera away as she started to compose herself. "Ah, that is a memory I will never forget," Garnet chuckled after calming down. "Now, who did this and what did you do to put yourself in this situation?" "I don't know. I got hungry and went out of my room when all these traps suddenly hit me. I just wanted to get a snack when someone pranked me." The purple-skinned gem couldn't believe it. Someone had pranked her. But who could it have been? It sure wasn't Steven. He was too young to have been able to even think about something as complicated as this, let alone pull it off. Grave was busy with the car wash, and other than that mailman, none of the townsfolk even know about this part of the beach. Who could it have been? The three older crystal gems were forced out of their thoughts as their ears had finally taken notice of the loud laughter coming from the porch. Pearl and Garnet walked over to the open window and peered down to see the trio responsible. Steven was laying on his front, banging his hands on the wooden deck, and Kurama was barely clinging on to the railing while his tails held a hanging Naruto by the foot, barely keeping him from falling down into the rocky sand beneath the house. All three were still howling in laughter. "I think we found our culprits," Garnet sighed, staring at the older male and his fox sibling as the trio calmed down. "Ah, now that was definitely a good way to alleviate boredom," Naruto chuckled, letting himself get pulled up by Kurama and Steven. Yeah, I know that this is funny and all, but could you get me out of here already?" Amethyst screamed in rage. Naruto smirked underneath his mask. "Kai!" With one hand sign, a very large seal array appeared on the floor and glowed before the wire. Fan, feathers, crib and other items as well as substances used in the prank disappeared along with the seal itself. All that was left was the baby Amethyst demanding to be returned to normal. Naruto's smirk turned into a full-blown grin, and he snapped his fingers, dispelling the illusions placed on Amethyst. Once she was back to normal, the white-haired gem immediately whooped and jumped through the open window, disappearing to who knows where for the rest of the day. The two remaining female gems turned to the injured off-worlder. "Mind telling us how exactly you managed to pull all those things off?" Garnet asked calmly, raising an eyebrow when the blonde gestured for them to go closer as if he was about to tell them a very important secret, but instead he just gave an eye smile as Kurama answered bluntly, "Using the awesomeness of foxes." Due to the excitement from 2 days ago, they had thought that the rest of the week would be comprised of nice calm ones. But they were wrong. That day was just a warning. There were many more hectic days to come. Pearl and Garnet had their arms crossed in front of their chests, and Pearl's foot was tapping the ground repeatedly as they deadpanned at a certain black-haired boy and his two new friends. At the moment it seemed that the flip-flop-wearing boy was the most mature out of the three sitting on the couch, considering who the children sitting with him were. Situated on the couch was none other than Steven, Naruto and Kurama. The young universe at least had a bit of guilt on his face, but the others were a different story. They had wide eyes along with childish smiles, although Naruto's remained unseen under the cloth covering half his face. Both were trying to make themselves look as innocent as possible and only focused on 2 of the 3 adult crystal gems, completely ignoring the snarling, paint-covered Amethyst standing beside them along with the colored liquid that was sliding down the walls and dripping down from the ceiling. "So, let me get this straight. You're saying that out of us 6 who are residing in this house, you 3 didn't have anything to do with Amethyst and the room's current state? Even though me and Garnet were in the temple and Amethyst saw that you 3 were coincidentally up on the rafters at the same time as paint balloons dropped on her head?" Pearl asked with a tired voice. Pearl had just arrived home with the other 2 females through the warp pad. She had left with Garnet to check on the newly bubbled gem that they had acquired during their mission. The trio of males were on Stephen's ledge playing video games and didn't have any sort of item near them that could have possibly given them a clue that this situation would happen, yet, in the span of 113 seconds, they had managed to splash paint on both Amethyst's head and the whole interior of the house. If this is what happens when she and Garnet leave them alone for 2 minutes, then who knows what they would be able to plan if they left for another mission without at least leaving Greg as their babysitter. Stephen chuckled nervously in response while the blonde and the fox just kept their eyes wide while their innocent smiles started to turn into their mischievous grins. Pearl sighed as she uncrossed her arms and rubbed her temples to soothe the growing headache that she could feel was forming. "What are we going to do with you?" she muttered, shaking her head. Amethyst's right eye twitched and veins started to bulge on her forehead. "Oh, I know what I'm going to do to them. Get over here, you," she cried, trying to pounce on them and get her revenge, but was grabbed by the back of her collar by the blank-faced Garnet. The corners of the square-haired woman's mouth were twitching slightly upwards in amusement. "Easy, Amethyst," she said, her voice, while still mostly impassive, held a bit of mirth in it. Garnet turned to the figure sitting on the couch. "Now, you three, because you are the cause of this mess, you are going to have to clean it all up." "All what?" "But Garnet," Stephen whined, not wanting to clean the large amount of paint coating the inside of his home. A smirk appeared on Naruto's face, and he discreetly formed a hand sign behind his back. Hidden seals activated, sucking up all the paint without the others noticing. "It's alright, Stephen, we don't have to clean anything. I mean, what mess are they even talking about? All I can see is a nice, clean home." The whiskered blonde smiled. Pearl blinked at what he said, before spreading her arms out and gesturing to the mess inside the house. "What do you mean we don't have to clean anything? Look around you. This place is completely spotless." The gem cut herself off when she had moved her eyesight away from Naruto and was shocked at the mess. Or rather the lack thereof. "How why you, where did the paint go? How did you do that?" Naruto I smiled. "I don't know what you're talking about. How did I do what? Arg." Pearl grabbed her hair as her right eye twitched when she looked at the blonde. He was so infuriating. She had been trying to get answers on as to what those strange symbols that he had used on Amethyst were, why they were glowing and what exactly they did, but he either dodged the question, came up with a snarky response, or something connected to Kurama coincidentally happened, and he had to leave immediately. It was really starting to get on her nerves. They barely knew anything about him. They didn't know his past, his abilities, what exactly he was and how he managed to do all these crazy things. Even his personality was odd. At one point he seems to be very cheerful. The next he's suddenly looking out of the window and up sky with melancholy. It didn't help that the irritating mask on his face was making it very hard for her to figure out what kind of person he really was. His eyes didn't even show any emotion other than blankness and at times cheerfulness. He was just so confusing. Naruto and Kurama laughed inside their shared mindscape. Messing with these people was so easy. The reactions they had to their teasing just encouraged the duo to torment them even more. Pearl was the most enjoyable to irk as her reactions were usually the most amusing. Since their prank on Amethyst 2 days ago, the duo had started to relax slightly. Unfortunately for the crystal gems, the Uzumaki and the Fox Biju's idea of relaxation meant pranking the heck out of those around them. Just yesterday, during Naruto's 3rd day of recovery, Amethyst found herself catapulted into the ocean 3 times. Pearl had become paranoid after 4 surprise attacks comprised of air horns and whipped cream pies to the face, and watched her back for the rest of the day in case the 2 off-worlders decided to surprise her again. Even Garnet had to look over her shoulder in case they were hiding in the shadows. She had made the mistake of getting them out of her peripheral vision for a few seconds and found herself having a clown costume over her usual outfit. When she blinked in surprise, they had somehow applied clown makeup onto her face. But as all this was going on, nothing was done to little Stephen due to the fact that he had been their accomplice the entire time, and had helped them greatly in accomplishing in their antics. "Hey, are you alright, Pearl? Your eye is twitching again. Is something bothering you?" Naruto smirked. The peach-haired gem just crossed her arms, twisted her head towards her left with her chin up and eyes clenched shut as she let out a humph, an action that was childish and oddly uncharacteristic of her. Naruto turned to Garnet and Amethyst. "Well, the room is spotless. Are we done here?" "Yes," Garnet replied, using the warp pad to leave while Pearl went to her favorite tree and Amethyst moved to the bathroom to wash the paint off of her. Steven looked towards the other two on the couch with him. So, what do you guys want to do now? Naruto and Kurama shared a glance before pouncing on the child, wrestling with the little boy. 5th day of Naruto's recovery week, 9:21 a.m. No, please? No. Come on. No, but Kurama. I said no, Naruto. Kurama's patience finally breaking after being subjected to his pouting little brother's petulant whining for the past 13 hours. It was around 9 o'clock in the morning. The blonde had been pleading for Kurama to let him train ever since Steven had gone to sleep yesterday night, although his resistance to his Otuto's annoyingness had grown in the years he had been with him. Even the nine-tailed fox had his limits. The bijou was sitting in front of the couch, which the whiskered shinobi was currently sat upon. Kurama had an irritated look on his face, his eyes were shut, his head was tilted down, and a visible tick mark was on his forehead, while a few fangs showed through the frown on his muzzle. He looked up at the still pouting Jinchuriki in front of him. He was about to speak when someone else beat him to it. What's going on here? Pearl asked. She had been outside on the porch with Steven when Kurama's loud outburst caught their attention. Is there a problem? Sigh, nothing that is of much importance. My stubborn little brother is just being a pain. His annoyance of the situation could be heard clearly in his voice. Pearl raised an eyebrow at his response. How so? She asked. He believes that although he is healed enough to walk without help, he is able to go train in the usual way he does when he is healthy. Well, with how his recovery is going, he should be able to do anything that isn't too strenuous. If you let him do what he considers as light training when he is in perfect condition, it would end in him being as injured as he is now. The fox sighed out. Oh well, he definitely isn't going anywhere alone anytime soon, she deadpanned. But ever since I woke up, I've always been inside the house. I want to get out. The blonde complained. He crossed both his arms and his legs childishly as he pouted under his mask. Pearl and Kurama face-palmed at the blonde while Steven's face lit up. Hey, how about I take you around Beach City? That way, you know where everything is if we aren't around and you won't be bored or doing anything stern, he said, struggling with the last word. Strenuous? Pearl suggested. A gentle smile was on her face as she looked at the little boy. Yeah, that. Steven grinned up at the taller gem. Kurama raised an eyebrow at the idea. The child was right. If he allowed him to take Naruto out on a tour, then the masked Uzumaki would stop complaining and wouldn't be doing anything that would make his cut reopen. The red fox turned towards his little brother, and sweat dropped as he saw that the shinobi was giving him the puppy dog eyes. The shinobi and bijou stared at each other for 2 minutes before the fox finally gave in with a sigh of resignation. All right, you can go. Now stop doing that. It's creeping me out, Naruto whooped. He then stood up, grabbed Steven and held him like how a football player would hold a ball. He was sprinting towards the door when he heard the kitsune whistle just before he could exit the house. Naruto skidded on the ground as he forced himself to stop. He spun around to face his Nai-san, only to have a black t-shirt that had the Uzumaki clan symbol on the front thrown at his face. At least put that on before you leave. It seems that you have forgotten that you are not wearing anything over your bandages, Kurama grunted. The young man just scratched the back of his head sheepishly and gave an eye smile. Naruto placed Steven down. He pulled the shirt off of his head and put it on. Once he was wearing the shirt, he grabbed the curly-haired boy once more before making a beeline towards Beach City, not noticing that he hadn't gone through the door. Kurama shook his head at his Otuto while Pearl just smirked as they looked at the window that Naruto had jumped through in his haste. You think he'll cause trouble? Well, if you're talking about Steven, no, but obviously you're asking about Naruto, and knowing that troublesome blonde, yep, with Steven and Naruto. 11:41 a.m. It had been around 2 hours since they had started their tour of Beach City. Steven had showed the ninja nearly every single place in the area, such as Funland Arcade, Beach City Walk Fries and the Big Donut. The curly-haired boy was currently dragging the blonde towards Fish Stew Pizza. Come on, Naruto. It's just right up ahead, he said eagerly. As they made their way towards the shop, they saw that Jenny, Kiki's twin, and her friends were standing outside the shop with frowns on their faces as they looked through the glass wall. Steven let out a confused huh? While Naruto raised an eyebrow as they slowed their pace. Hello? You're Kiki's sister, right, Jenny? Steven asked, the older male beside him keeping quiet. Yeah, that's me. You need something, kid? The girl and the 2 boys with her stopped their staring and looked at the short boy. Why are you out here? Wouldn't it be better if you were inside? He asked, tilting his head to the side in curiosity. Well, we would be inside. But those guys in there kicked us out when we tried to make them get out. Their leader keeps asking Kiki out even though she keeps saying no. We stepped in when they tried to use force but they pushed us out, Jenny replied. What they're doing isn't cool, said the sunglass-wearing boy to her right. Yeah, the white-haired one agreed. We want to help, but there's 5 of them. They'll just beat us easily. Stephen's face had a confused expression, lacking the maturity and knowledge to understand what the 5 have been trying to do other than that they had tried to harm Kiki in some way. He peered into the shop through the glass wall, seeing the same 5 people that had been making Kiki uncomfortable when he and Kurama went to get pizza a few days ago. Hey, it's those guys again, he said, eyes widening in recognition. You know them, kiddo? Naruto finally spoke. Yeah, they were bothering Kiki a few days ago when me and Kurama went to get food. I was talking to the guy closest to Kiki and he looked like he was going to hit someone. But Kurama just stood behind them and growled. They ran off scared after a little bark. It was pretty funny. The young universe giggled. Naruto, however, narrowed his eyes. Hey, big bro, by any chance, when you and Steven got pizza, did you guys encounter any interesting people? Just a few runts that walked as if they owned the place. Kinda reminded me of how the Uchiha kid was before Team 7 occurred. Always looking down at people because he was not only the rookie of the year but was also heir to the greatest clan in the elemental nations. One of the brats actually tried to hit the kid. Heh. One growl and they ran away with their tails between their legs. Why'd you ask? Hey. Oh, nothing. Naruto grew an evil smirk under his mask. By how Kurama described them, they definitely wouldn't leave without a fight. This was going to be fun. How about we help them out, little one? He asked. Steven smiled and nodded. The child opened the door and walked in with Naruto in tow. The 5 had their backs towards them. Steven immediately ran in front of them, acting as a barrier between the quintet and the pizza waitress while Naruto walked calmly behind the group. The young universe and the leader started to yell at each other, arguing back and forth as the shinobi chose to stand silently behind the oddly dressed teens. I said beat it, kid! The leader growled out, starting to raise his fist. Just when he was about to hit Steven, Naruto grabbed his wrist in a tight grip, making the angered teen's fist halt instantly. What the heck do you think you're? The male had spun around. He was about to complain to the perpetrator about their intervention but paused when he saw that he was facing a chest instead of a face. He looked up, only to see the blonde shinobi's narrowed ice-cold eyes and the dangerous look they had in them. The posse saw Naruto holding their leader's wrist and flinched at the sight of the very tall Uzumaki. Who do you think you are, trying to hit a defenseless child? Naruto stared coldly into the frozen teen's eyes, his calm yet deadly tone scaring the shorter boy even more. The boy stood still in fear for a few seconds before shaking his head clear of his dread. He felt Naruto start to let go of his wrist, and wrenched it away from him once his grip had loosened considerably. The kid was annoying me and wouldn't stop sticking his head into other people's business. I was just ordering some pizza and asking for directions when he started to yell about me making the pretty waitress here uncomfortable. He lied, glaring at Steven as he rubbed his wrist in pain. Is that so? Because I was with Steven here the whole time. You certainly didn't seem like you were here for the pizza. The Jinchuriki droned out lazily, ruffling said child's hair, who then hugged his leg. The interaction between the two made the teen flinch. Well, it ain't none of your business anyway. Besides, what makes you think you can just grab me like that? My name's Takashi, the son of one of the wealthiest businessmen in Japan. Even though I've only been taking lessons and fighting for a few months, some weakling like you won't last a second against me, he said arrogantly, puffing his chest up in pride with a smirk on his face. Ugh, Kurama was right. It's just like Sasuke and I before Team 7 all over again, Naruto groaned in his mind. In the outside world, he merely gave the shorter boy a really? Look, oh, you think you can prove that to me outside, rich boy? Takashi smirked at this, and strode out of the door confidently. 2 minutes later, Naruto stood across Takashi on the boardwalk. His stance was relaxed and he had his hands in his pockets. Steve and Kiki, Jenny and the 2 boys called Buck and Sour Cream stood in a line as a barrier to his left while Takashi's gang was lined up to his right. Let's go! Takashi smirked, dashing towards the Uzumaki. Naruto moved head slightly backwards, dodging a spinning kick aimed to his head. He then pivoted to get away from a hit aimed the right side of his torso before jumping slightly over a low spinning sweep kick. Takeshi saw that Naruto was looking at him as if he was dealing with a mere child and grew enraged. Damn it! Take me seriously! He growled in anger. The ninja continued to dodge Takeshi's attacks nonchalantly by ducking, pivoting and moving slightly to the side, his hands still in his pockets and a bored look on his face. After a few more minutes, he grabbed the teen's arm and flipped him into the ground. His casual dismissals annoyed Takeshi even more, and from his position on the floor, the boy signaled his comrades to help, seeing the discreet gesture that Takeshi had sent his friends. Naruto sighed as the four tried to sneak up on him. Keyword: tried. He snatched the arm of the boy who was aiming to punch his back and spun him into the other one who was aiming for his left side, their momentum sending them flying into the sand. The two girls had tried to trap him by attacking both his left and right. He rolled forwards to dodge the kicks that were headed for his skull and feet. He quickly spun back to face them, grabbing their arms, and threw one of them on top of the two boys while the other was thrown at Takeshi, who was trying to stand back up, and the force of the throw made them fall into the sand beside the other three. Naruto walked to the edge of the boardwalk and looked down at the teens with his arms crossed. Ah, geez, if that's all you got, then I'm sad that I actually thought that this would be mildly amusing. You five better not cause any trouble, or next time, I'll throw you into a more undesirable place instead of sand, he said, using his head to point at a dumpster nearby. The Jinchuriki turned away from them and walked over to Steven and the four other spectators of the fight. Well, that's that. Ready to go home, kiddo? I smiled at the starry-eyed boy. Steven jumped onto Naruto, holding onto his waist with a big smile. That was so cool. Can you teach me how to do that? Please. Naruto chuckled at him, ruffling the boy's hair. Maybe, squirt. Now let's head back. He put the pink shirt-wearing youth in a piggyback and darted towards the temple, Steven whooping in happiness the whole time. 5 minutes later they were on the side of the beach where the house was situated at. Naruto was about to leap up to the porch when his danger senses went off and he managed to jump back in time to dodge the large horn of a giant, dark green, narwhal-like creature. Whoa! Steven said in amazement, staring at the massive gem monster. The heck, what is this thing? It must be one of those crystal monsters that Pearl and the others always fight. The young half-gem cried out, seeing the hexagonal object embedded into the stomach of the ocean dweller. A what? The blonde looked at Steven incredulously. A gem monster. It's why the crystal gems always leave the house. They go to deal with stuff like this every day so that no humans get hurt by them. He raised his eyebrows at the new information before narrowing his eyes when he saw that the narwhal had swum back into the sea and was making a U-turn. It was quickly swimming its way back towards them, intending to pierce through both of the gems on the beach using its horn. He placed the child hanging around his neck by the bottom of the house's staircase and slowly lowered into a stance. Steven, stay behind me, Naruto ordered before rushing at the humongous horned whale. When he was about to be impaled he quickly sidestepped to the left and snagged the beast's long tusk, using its speed to help him spin the gargantuan gem around 3 times before throwing it up in the air. Spinning as it flew high up in the sky, the shinobi bent his knees, his eyes focused on his target. Sending chakra to his legs, he pushed off of the sand, appearing above the monster and performed a drop kick. The force of his attack was so great that the two figures fell back down onto the beach in a blur, causing a tremor as their landing kicked up large quantities of sand particles. Naruto stood on top of his defeated opponent before it disappeared in a puff of smoke, a small, lime-colored gem now in its place below his feet. He picked it up and examined it curiously, not hearing the loud bang of a door being slammed open. Pearl, Garnet, Amethyst and Kurama raced out of the house when they felt the earth quake, jumping down from the porch when Steven's figure entered their peripheral vision. Steven! Are you alright? Are you hurt? What's going on? Pearl asked the boy hurriedly, panic evident in her voice. Steven could only manage a point in the direction of the immense imprint of the narwhal meters in front of him, as he was still shell-shocked at what he had witnessed Naruto do. The 4 new arrivals' eyes widened when they saw the odd-shaped hole. How did we miss that? Pearl deadpanned mentally as she ran towards the anomaly with the others in tow and was surprised to see Naruto standing in the middle, inspecting something in his hand with interest. Naruto, said Male, paused his analyzing and made eye contact with the gem who had called out to him. Yo. One question, are giant animals after your blood a normal occurrence around here? Pearl could only blink in confusion at the strange question before a glint hit her eye and she saw the jewel he held in his hand. A gem? She thought in surprise. Well, that's a weird question to ask, Amethyst said blankly. Considering that an overgrown fish just tried to impale me and Steven, you can't really blame me for asking that question, he replied, tossing the gem to Garnet, who promptly nabbed it from the air. Yes, I suppose it is quite common, though not in this area here specifically. All around the world they appear very often, Garnet answered. At this point, Steven had gotten out of his shock and pounced on Naruto's back once the older male had stood up after climbing out of the crater. That was awesome! You have to teach me how to fight now. Why didn't you tell me you could do that? He exclaimed excitedly. What are you rambling on about, Steven? What happened here? Amethyst asked. It was so cool. The thing was big, but he threw it into the air, jumped after it, and kicked it down so hard that the ground shook. Please teach me, Steven said, yelling the last sentence in Naruto's direction. The shinobi himself just scratched his head sheepishly as Kurama shook his head tiredly. Of course, he should have known that Naruto was the one who caused all that quaking. While the fox chuckled slightly, the gems looked at the size of the crater before turning to the blonde in disbelief. It was nothing, really. It was trying to hurt you, so I got rid of it. I really wanted to finish it off faster, but I can't really do much yet with my injuries and all, he chuckled embarrassedly, his response making the crystal gems even more stunned. He was a human, yet he threw a being of this size and managed to cause a mini-earthquake by kicking it. But all he had to say about what had happened was it was nothing. Naruto tilted his head upwards, his nose twitching slightly as he sniffed the air when he smelt a familiar scent. His eyes widened in realization. I sniff, is that cookies? He sniffed the air some more to track the smell down. After a few moments, his head snapped to Pearl and he saw that she was wearing mittens. The scent of cookies was emanating from the large gloves, and Pearl had come out of the house when the earth vibrated, which meant he immediately hoisted Steven in a fireman's carry and made his way towards the house, jumping up to the porch all the while laughing in childish glee. Kurama shook his head again, a small grin on his face as he followed his Ototo's lead. He hurtled over the staircase, intending to get some of the delicious treats before his brother ate all of the food. The gems shared a glance and leaped towards the house after them, too hoping to get some answers, while the last only went for the cookies. 5th day of Naruto's recovery week. Inside Steven's house, the crystal gems had asked many questions but were unsuccessful in figuring out how exactly the blonde did what he did the previous day. As the duo had avoided the questions as usual, it was around 3:21 p.m. The three were currently out on a mission and the brothers were dozing lazily on the beams that supported the house's roof. Their snores echoed in the empty home. Meanwhile, Steven was dragging a certain long-haired man up the stairs and into the house. Hey, come on, Dad! You've got to meet them, they're amazing, he said eagerly, clutching onto the man's big hand as he pushed the door open and pulled his father in. Hee, all right, Steven, but are you sure they're safe to be around? The gems did say that they were fine, right? Greg asked his son as he stepped inside house nervously. Yeah, they're fine. They even came with me when I went into town a few times to make sure that I'd be safe. Now where are they? The father-son duo scanned the area for any sign of the off-worlders, and jolted when two oddly identical snores rang throughout the home. They looked up and saw the two were sleeping on the wooden pillars. Greg let out a surprised gah, while Steven just giggled at the sight. Snatching two cushions from the couch, the little boy threw one at Naruto, who was laying on his back, and the other at Kurama, who was snoozing on his stomach. The ninja caught it subconsciously and sat up straight the moment the small pillow touched his hand, and Kurama deflected his opposing object using a tail. Oh, hey Squirt, what's with waking us up? Ya need something? He yawned out, rubbing his eye with his unoccupied hand as he and Kurama tossed the fluffy things back into their positions on the couch. Sorry, I just wanted you guys to meet my dad. The child beamed up at them. Your dad? Now that caught their interest. As they finally saw the large figure that Steven was standing beside, the fox and the Jinchuriki slid off of their positions and landed silently on the ground. They examined the chubby, brown-haired man who was wearing a white singlet, a pair of blue shorts and flip-flops. Hey there, my name is Greg Universe. The now-named Greg smiled, holding out his hand for Naruto to shake. The Uzumaki gave an eye smile back and shook the other male's hand. Nice to meet you. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. This here is Kurama, he replied, gesturing to the blood-red fox beside him. It's nice to meet you too. Yes, it is a pleasure to meet the young one's father. Greg flinched. He can talk? Hey, yeah, sorry about that. We're quite used to Steven and the others knowing about his ability to speak. I guess we occasionally forget that talking animals isn't exactly a common thing, Naruto said, chuckling slightly. That piece of information does slip from our minds very often. The Elder Universe sighed. Well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. After all, the gems aren't exactly normal either. Yeah, they always say that they come from space and that they aren't human, Steven added happily, staring up at Naruto. Really? Kurama did say something about them summoning weapons from thin air when he first saw them, and you mentioned that they always disappeared to help humanity from giant monsters. They never actually told us much about that. But we definitely knew that they weren't human. After all, what human could make weapons appear from nothing? The Uzumaki said, raising an eyebrow. Ah, dang it! Greg flinched once more. The thought of the three women going after him and his son because they had inadvertently revealed information that they did not want to release filled him with fear. He could only hope that they wouldn't be angry. You can, Naruto. Heh, come on, Kurama. You know I'm not human anymore, nor can I be even called one. We don't know what exactly I am now, he thought sadly. Grr, don't start talking like that again, Naruto. Naruto shook his head, wanting to get to know Greg better instead of getting lectured by his older brother. So, Greg, why does Steven stay here with Pearl, Garnet and Amethyst? Shouldn't he be living with you? He inquired, raising an eyebrow in curiosity. Other than the fact that the gems can teach Steven more than I can, I don't actually have a house. I own a car wash, but I sleep in my van. The half-bald man laughed embarrassedly. Better than us at least. We don't have a house either. But we don't even have a job. Naruto guffawed, slapping Greg's back. The other man smiled, laughing along with Naruto as he was starting to get more comfortable around his son's two new friends. Steven was smiling at the sight of the mysterious two bonding with his dad. They had chatted for hours, sharing stories of Steven's mother and the pranks that were pulled in the last few days. The time was now 12:53 a.m. Greg had gone home 5 hours ago. Steven was out like a light in his bed and Kurama laid on the couch beside a wide-awake Naruto. You have to at least try to get some rest. So we've been over this many times for the past 5 years we've been in this world, Kurama. No matter how many times I try, I'll never get any rest. Their pained faces always appear whenever I attempt to sleep. Why do the temple door opened and Pearl walked out, wanting to watch the moon set, not having anything else to do. She was taken aback when she saw that Naruto was once again awake at a late hour, albeit a few hours earlier than the last time she caught him not sleeping, but still, this is the second time I've seen him at this hour. You're still awake? She sighed at him. Hee, I guess I still can't sleep that easily, he replied sheepishly, giving her the most convincing eye smile he could manage at that moment, though she didn't seem all that convinced. As much as Pearl may not have wanted to admit it, she had enjoyed having Naruto and Kurama around, and honestly, the young man's habit of staying up late was starting to worry her. This really isn't doing you any favors for your health. Pearl had her hands at her hips, giving him a suspicious look. Hey, no need to worry, I'm going to go back to sleep after a few minutes, just like last time, his eye smile faltering slightly in his fatigue. Pearl sighed out an alright before returning to her room. 10 minutes later, the pale gem returned to the outside of the temple to check up on Naruto, only to find that Kurama was sleeping on the couch, and that the blonde himself was nowhere to be seen. She even checked the support beams above her head. I'll go back to sleep in a few minutes, he says. Pearl stood there, scanning the room one last time for any sign of Naruto before returning to her room, shaking her head as she sighed, not noticing the piercing red eyes that slid open and watched her as she returned to her room. Kurama hummed in thought. 6th day of Naruto's recovery week. It's a wash car wash, 10:21 a.m. Loud, fluid strums of a guitar could be heard coming out of the van located outside the car wash it was parked in front of. Naruto let the last strum ring out as Greg and Steven clapped. The three were sitting cross-legged inside Greg's van, guitars in hand as Kurama slept on the van's roof. Naruto grinned under his mask as the other two whooped at his accomplishment. At this point in time, the three would usually be in the house playing a prank war against Amethyst. But Steven's questioning of whether the brothers would stay with them forever had caused an air of awkwardness in the house earlier in the morning. The three, deciding to leave the house as the silence and wariness had made them feel uneasy, went to visit Greg and had been learning how to play musical instruments for the past few hours. Wow, the first lesson and you've already learned so much, Greg said with an impressed tone. Yeah, how come it's so easy for you? Steven smiled, tilting his head to the side. Naruto scratched his covered cheek in an embarrassed way. Well, to simply put, I am a kinesthetic learner, he answered. Steven let out a confused huh? His reaction making the two adults chuckle. Let me explain. Back when I was a kid like you, Steven, I was never all that good at the listen and take notes stuff that my school had us students do. I always did worse when I had to memorize the history of things and recite how they worked compared to when I had to learn something by doing it myself. Unfortunately, because of that, I was at the bottom of every class I was in. The academy I went to did a lot more bookwork than physical work, not a good place to learn in for a kinesthetic learner. A kinesthetic learner is someone who learns better from doing and moving rather than sitting still and reading information off of boards or books. Though the teachers aiming to give me the worst education anyone ever got certainly didn't help, he explained, mumbling the last sentence slowly as he remembered the biased senseis. Not knowing that Greg had caught what he had said, after all these years it still confused Naruto and Kurama that Konoha Shinobi Academy, the school that was meant to teach village's future defenders, taught their students less physical exercises than the civilian schools. The teachers sabotaged his learning? Why would they do that? Greg thought curiously. After mulling on whether he should ask about it or not, he chose to put the information into the back of his head for now and think about it later. He did have a music lesson to teach after all. You've improved a lot, Naruto. Now how about you try this? 8:36 p.m. Honestly, Garnet, what are we supposed to do about those two? They haven't done anything wrong, and they never had any ill intent the whole time they were here. If their care about Steven's safety is anything to go by. But as much as I would like to agree that they would be able to stay should they want to, all those things that they have been able to do, from the symbols they had used in their first prank to the super strength that Naruto seems to have, definitely causes suspicion, Pearl said to the taller gem. Ever since the males had left for Greg's, the females had been discussing about the Offworlders staying with them. Pearl knew that if she was to be honest, she had grown to like the two siblings and would be completely happy with them joining their little group. They had always looked after Steven whenever she and the others went on missions. Their constant pranks gave their days more laughter, and their goofiness made them smile instantly no matter what mood they were in. But it was up to Garnet to have the final say. The gem in question, Ed. As she thought about her decision, she remained quiet, and after 3 tense, silent minutes she spoke. Although their usage of unusual abilities are quite suspicious, you said it yourself, Pearl. They've never done anything wrong during their stay with us, and neither of them have shown any ill will towards anyone. As for their powers, considering what we have seen them do, they may be able to help us out on missions and might make things easier in some cases. I say we agree to them being able to live here, if they want to, Garnet replied. She had to admit that having them around was quite enjoyable. Ah, yeah. This is going to be awesome. I can't wait to tell Steven about this. Amethyst spoke up, a grin on her face. While she had been their most common target to prank, even she laughed at the things that had happened to her and the others in the past few days. The door slammed open. The gems turned only to see that Naruto and Steven had swirls in their eyes as they were lying down on the floor in a heap with Kurama sitting on top of them triumphantly. Giving the two below him a smirk, the fox bellowed, "That's it, mortals, fear me! Fear the almighty and great, nine-tailed fox god!" he yelled, cackling maniacally. His announcement immediately caused him to be shrugged off and tackled to the ground. The gems sighed and sweat dropped at the sight. They slowly walked over towards the trio to tell them of their decision. "All right, you three, that's enough," Pearl said with an amused smile on her face. "We have something to say to you guys." The three stopped their wrestling. Curious looks were sent towards the 3 female gems. "What is it?" "We have thought about Steven's proposal from earlier and have given you permission to go through with it," Garnet smirked. "Wait, does that mean?" Steven shakily stood up after he managed to pry himself from underneath the Offworlders. "Yes, Steven, should they desire to. Both Naruto and Kurama may live with us here in the house," Pearl clarified, giggling slightly when Steven's face lit up and he started hopping on top of the 2 siblings. "Yeh-cha-cha-cha. Come on, Naruto, Kurama, jump with me, you guys can stay here with us now." "Ha ha. You guys are going to stay, aren't you?" he asked, stopping his movements. The boy looked below him, activating his puppy dog eyes as he stared at the 2 who he had begun to think of as his older brothers. The 2 in question chuckled at the sight as they had a conversation within their minds. "Well, what do you say, Kurama? Should we stay?" "I don't really care. But if we were to not leave Beach City, There's the fact that we have to do extra precautions to make sure that Yurajiramono doesn't harm Steven and the others. Yes, I had forgotten about Rifu. I was genuinely enjoying our stay here. It is up to you whether we should leave or not. Don't make Rifu's existence affect your choice too much. Remember, while he does have that poison, we can easily mislead his men. Besides, even if you do stay here and they do find this place, you can just use your body as a meat shield for the others. After all, since you have already been hit with the poison, your body has adapted to it, and beating it back will go much easier the next time. Meat shield, really, Kurama? Sigh, well, since you don't really care either way, I guess we're staying. Wouldn't want to make little Steven sad, now would we? Naruto laughed before leaving the mindscape. Humph, you may not have noticed, but I sure have. Ever since we got here, you've been happier than you have ever been these past 3 years. I can only hope that they will help fully remove your mask and the walls you have brought up to protect yourself. The Bija thought to himself as he returned to the real world as well. Wheel? Steven widened his eyes even more. How could we say no to a face like that, kiddo? Naruto smirked at the boy, whose face lit up in excitement as he pounced onto the older male's back. The child's repeated orders to mush, causing him to chuckle. Final day of Naruto's recovery week. Gahaha! A bare-chested Naruto laughed as he jumped away from a large, jagged crab claw. He ran underneath the shelled beast, past the crustacean's thin legs, and roundhouse kicked it from behind. The strength of his attack showed through the large crab face planting into the sand, creating a large indentation. The female gems watched amazedly from the house's porch while Kurama just looked on with a bored expression. The Uzumaki hopped onto the mutated gem's shielded back and was about to punch through its armor when he noticed that Steven was standing a few meters away from the beast's mouth. Steven, move! He shouted, but the child was paralyzed as the beast opened its mouth and breathed out spikes of ice. In a blur of speed, the shinobi rocketed towards the young universe. He felt an ice shard graze the side of his chest as he was barely able to grab Steven and move him to the bottom of the house's staircase. He spun around to face his opponent once more. Disappearing into thin air, the blonde reappeared above the monster, his fist coated with an invisible sheet of wind chakra. His fist drilled into its shell, causing the fiend to retreat back into its gem in a puff of smoke. Naruto caught the jewel before he shunshined to Steven, grabbing the little child, and used Shunshin again to teleport beside Kurama. Kid, what the heck were you thinking going down there? Do you know how dangerous that stunt you pulled was? The mask-wearing Jinchuriki roared. After a minute of silence, he finally noticed the surprised looks that everyone else had on their faces. What is it? Kid, your chest. Naruto raised an eyebrow and looked down to check on his bare torso. It took a flash of light that reflected from the orb to hit his eye for him to realize what the problem was. There was nothing covering his chest. My bandages. How did this hap? Wait, Naruto's thoughts halted.